If you need assistance after today's training, you can contact us at ccu@berkeley.edu, and I'll follow up with this at the end of the training. You guys have all this information, but I wanted to let you know. And then if you need to send in a service request for the telecom catalog, you still use the same address, telcat.berkeley.edu.
Yesterday, we had talked all about the real-time activity. Here I'm looking at my all group here. And I can see calls waiting all over the call center right here, especially in Cal Student Central. Yeah, I can see the agents that are on calls right now, those that are sitting idle. Now, of course, they're all idle because they're in other groups that need calls are waiting, okay, which is why they're not answering them. But all the activity that is happening in our contact center in real time. We talked about the review page as well to see all the call activity for the day so far and combining that all on a home page. Any questions on anything we covered yesterday? Okay, then let's take a look at reports. Reports allows us to take a look at the historical call activity for our contact center. The replay and the visualizer all are combined with the report, so it allows us to really look at our historical data. The visualizer can help us really understand why certain numbers are appearing in our reports by looking at calls from their very beginning to very end as well. So we're going to take a look at some examples using that tool as we go along here. The main thing we're going to talk about today is the historical reports. Task has literally over 150 different types of reports, and we're going to go through every single one in excruciatingly detailed format today. Oh, you're all excited? Yes, okay, no, we're not. Just had lunch and I'm fighting falling asleep. Okay, after that, so we're not going to get into that. But no, we have many, many reports. They're broken down on a daily, weekly, monthly, or year-to-date basis. So you can see a full year or a full 2 years worth of data in a single report, or any number of weeks or months. So you can do quarterly reports, bi-yearly reports very, very easily. And with these, you can report on anything. Our agents, our groups of agents, our queues and groups of queues, or our extension. And we can even look at the trunks if you're interested. I don't think anybody will be interested in the trunk reporting, so I won't get into it unless you do ask politely. Then I can show you if you want to see some of that. But mostly we're going to focus in on our call activity through the queues and our employee activity through our agent reporting. Now, as I said, we have lots of reports. So we need a way to organize these reports to make it very easy for you to get at them when you need certain information. So what we do is we create under each of our sections here, and we're going to focus mostly on our daily reports today, but we create what are known as report templates. These are folders where you're going to place the standard reports that are available in Task, selecting the ones that are most important to you, and then save it so that you will have a list of these folders which you can then simply click on, apply a date, and then see that data. You can then view that information on the screen, print it if you would like. You'll also be able to export it into many different file formats, and eventually you'll be able to have the ability to email it right out of the Task software. Okay? That's a feature in Task. We're just looking to make sure we have the network ability here at UC Berkeley to do that. Okay, so with that, let's begin. Now, as I said, we're going to concentrate on the daily report templates. But once you've mastered that, once you know how to create a template under the daily reports, select the reports you wish to see, and then view those reports and understand what they say, you will know how weekly and monthly and year-to-date reports all work, because it's the same exact process. It's the same exact reports. The only thing that are different is the amount of data that you can see in the report, a whole week's worth, a whole month's, or a whole year's worth of data, okay? We'll also, though, try to throw in some examples of that depending on the time and how we're cruising along here. Good. Now, everybody will have under the daily report templates a default template. The default template will contain the queue by hour report for the skills you selected at your welcome screen. So when you first logged into Task, when you started looking at real-time data yesterday, you selected one or more different queues that you can monitor, it's created a default template with the by hour reports in it. We're going to ignore that though because we want to go through the process of creating a template. We want to look at more than just the by hour report. So let's begin. The first reports we're going to look at will be our queue reports, where we can see the big volume of numbers, the call counts to your business. So we can really analyze how calls are flowing in, how they're being handled, and know exactly how we have to proceed in our management. To create a new report template, what do you think it'll do? Yes, click the new report template button.
Thank you, Vanna.
All right. First thing you do is name it. Okay, we're going to look at queue reports, so you might call it queue report. You might call it call activity, my call activity. You might name it after your department, CSS call activity, HR, okay, TANG department. Okay. Or it can be generic. Now, of course, if your name is not descriptive enough, you can add a description. You don't have to add a description, but you can. Although, if your name is not descriptive enough, you might want to change the name. But a description can help identify what's in it, like my call count reports, or I'll have the queue by hour and the abandoned caller report in there. You know, something you can describe it. One thing to note with the names here, you cannot use any punctuation or symbols, only letters and numbers. So for some reason, the interface does not like punctuation or symbols. Now, the notification reports here will include that with a checkbox. What that'll do is it'll tell you for the day or any time period that you're running the report for if the task software was turned off and then switched back on. This is important to know if you ever suspect your report numbers might be incorrect, essentially missing data. Okay, now, as far as your report numbers, you might think they're incorrect because they don't look right, but if maybe you look at the reports and see that between the hours of 1 and 2 o'clock, there's just no calls, okay, which is unheard of in certain departments, right? You might say, hey, this can't be right, we're missing data here. The notification report could confirm that if the reason there's no data is because the task server was turned off. That software was not collecting data from the phone switch. And so then you will know by that report there that, hey, for that time of day, I can't trust the reports there, so let's make sure we have a full day's worth with no notifications. We'll take a look at that and explain it again, because there will be a notification for yesterday that I wanted to show you. Great, that's how we name our template. Now once that's done, we're going to choose Save. And then we're going to scroll down on our page here to the bottom half of the window where we have our different report types. These include our queue and queue group reports, our agent and agent group reports, our extension reports, trunk reports, and our DNIS reports. The queue reports are up top because they are the most important reports. You might not feel that way, but typically they are because those are your call counts. Those are the numbers of calls into your department. So that's where we'll begin by clicking Edit next to the queue reports over here on the far right. Under queue reports, we have 4 different report types: basic queue reports, and then our 3 spectrum reports, our answer, abandoned, and interflow reports. If you remember from yesterday, we took a look at the spectrum settings in the task administrator. This is just going to allow us to see over a series of wait times when calls are answered, abandoned, or interflowed. So let's start with the basic queue reports. When we click the edit there, you will now see a list of all of your queues. Now in this particular case, you can see every queue, all 126 of them that are in the task database, okay, because I have unlimited restrictions. But for everybody else, or everybody eventually, you'll only be seeing your queues to make it very easy for you to find what information you're looking for. All of the queues are listed over here on the left-hand side, and our options are across the top. The first report that we want to run, the most important report, if you run no other queue report in the system, this is the one you want to look at, and it will be the by hour report. We're going to check the box in that particular column, and it will allow us to see then your basic call activity, offered, answered, abandoned, interflows, service levels, all of that good information there. And so here's our enrollments queue. We've selected by hour. Now, if you are interested, you can also run quarter hour and half hour reports, all 3 if you wish, or whichever one is most useful for you. Our reports are 24 hours in length, okay, from midnight to midnight, so just be aware that the quarter-hour report will be very long, about 120 lines, okay? But if your call center is extremely busy, the enrollment, the by quarter-hour report can be very useful. So you can really kind of parse a single hour. Where are you busiest? The first 15 minutes or the third or the last? What is the case there? Okay. Good stuff. Okay, the DNS report, don't know if it's going to work for enrollments. It certainly would for some of the CSS groups, and so maybe we can show an example of that. So the DNS report will tell you what phone number was called to reach that specific queue. Okay, so give it a check there. We'll also check it on some of the other queues that we look at. All right. Now, the next three reports are pretty useful if you take calls from all over the United States or from outside of UC Berkeley. A lot of the different departments take primarily internal calls, and so the area code and city and state reports are not very useful. But if you'd like to know where all of your calls are coming from, these three reports can show you with varying levels of detail what the caller IDs are and where they're located. So just the area code and city can show you a city and state based off the area code and prefix, and the state is just a big summary of all that information. Go ahead and check those three reports and we'll see what they tell us as far as enrollments are concerned. Now, the abandoned call report is super useful if you have abandoned calls. It will show you every abandoned call, the time of day they abandoned, the time to abandon, so the wait time in queue before they hung up, and then the caller ID or the extension number of that abandoned caller. So even if it was an internal call and the caller hung up while in queue, we will see who did it, at least the number anyway. So go ahead and select that for me. Our last report, talk time distribution, is really useful in allowing you to analyze all the talk times within the queue. The basic queue report by hour will show us our average talk time, but this one will show you all the talk times in a graph, so you can really see how the average was derived, see if it's really a true average, like a bell curve of talk times, or if it's a normal average over just a scattered bunch of unique timed calls. Okay? Knowing what all the calls typically look like and where your exceptions might be, the deviation from that average, can really help you be much more specific in scheduling models and things like that. And plus, it looks pretty cool. It's a graph, so let's do that. All right, those are all the queue reports for enrollments. Now, let's look at another queue. So somebody else, since we have them all out there, who else would like to look at their numbers?
I do.
Great. Which queue would you like to see call activity for?
Paying appointment.
Paying appointment. All right, let's do it by hour, by DNS, by area code, all of them down the line there. Great. Anybody else? Anybody on our...
Can I get the other one too, because it goes hand in hand. The paying a device and the paying appointment go hand in hand, yeah.
Okay. Anybody on our GoToMeeting like to see some numbers and review them with us?
Erica, you want to do HR level 1 just because it'll give you something for CSS?
Yes, let's do it.
So CSS HR level 1.
Here's a trick.
Do a search.
Yes. You can search this page. There isn't a search tool within the task reports, but if you do a Control F, it will search it just like a plain old ordinary website. Okay. So that's a neat little trick if you have far too many cues for yourself to scroll through. So HR level 1 right there. So 71430. Let's break them all down. All right. So these 4 cues here should be nice and useful for us. Now, remember what those cues are. Let's now return to the previous page and select our spectrum reports for the same skills.
So should we save that first?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So you don't want to, when I say return to the previous page, you don't want to use the forward and back buttons in the browser. They don't work very well within this active software here, this web page. So you want to always use the controls within the web page. And of course, we want to save these settings. When we save it, it returns to our queue report list, and now we can select the edit link for answer spectrum. The spectrum report is simply broken down by time of day. So for our examples here, for the 4 Qs we've selected, we're going to choose our by hour. So we'll do enrollments, and then we'll scroll down and find Tang appointment, Tang advice, and then CSS 71430. Here we are, level 1. We'll choose save and do the same thing for our abandoned spectrum report. So we're now going to be able to look at all the abandoned calls over a series of wait times before they hang up.
Now we put a 30-second.
Yeah, we can eliminate all their effect on the service levels anyway with that. And now the last one is our interflow spectrum. So in case our particular queue gets a lot of interflows, we will see that, and I will explain what interflows are when we take a look at reports. All right, so there we are. Let's choose done, and let's choose done one last time to save the entire template. We're finished with that process, and now we have our new program template in our list. At this point, when you wish to run the report, all you need to do is log into Task, go to the report section, and you will see all your saved templates. Give a click to the template name, and then choose a date from the drop-down menu. And we're going to choose yesterday, the 9th. Click on View, and voila, our reports appear. Now, are there any questions, first of all, on how we got this far into our reporting?
If you choose today's date, will it go from midnight till close to 15 we are?
Yes. Okay, so you can run a report on today's date, and it will be as accurate as at the most it might be 15 minutes behind, okay, because things are summarized every 15 minutes on the server. But yes, you can run today's report if you would like. Okay, good. All of our reports now are listed over on the left-hand side in this index, and we can quickly jump to any report by simply clicking on the name of that report. The first one here, of course, is our enrollment queue by hour report. Okay? Now, what we're going to do here, notice in the interface here with this particular resolution, the entire report doesn't fit on the page. And of course, it being 24 hours in length, we can't see the entire view here. You will be able to see the data, of course, as you scroll up and down, and eventually you'll know what every column means, so you can simply scroll through the list and know exactly what you're looking at. But we can also view it on a much bigger window, if we would like, by using our print feature. Okay. You can print your reports by clicking the print button over on the right-hand side. And by choosing the top radio button and choosing that one only, okay, print the current page of the template. Okay. When you click OK, it will open that report in a new window. So now we have much more nicer view of everything here in this window, okay? And then you can maximize it and so on. Using the printer or the browser's print function, you can then send this to a printer, and it will print out exactly as it shows up on the page here with a very nice font and the slightly shaded rows there. And at the bottom of the report, the colored graphs will even print as well, especially if you send it to a color printer. They will be in color. All right. Now, of course, we still have a little bit of scrolling to do here, but we can see much more of the report. Oh, also with the printing, it will fit the report to the page, so it won't have to go to multiple pages or cut anything off.
Is there a setting where you can tell it, I only want to see from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m.?
Well, yes, there is, but that's a universal setting that's on the phones or on the task server. Okay, so eventually, if you find that between 7 and 5 p.m. or if it's between 5 a.m. and 8 p.m., if you agree on a time there that captures all the data that everybody really needs, then we could make it a little bit more precise. But right now, until we know what all people's times are, we're just leaving it wide open. So. Good. Let's scroll back up to the top and take a look at what type of information is here in the Q report. First of all, it's going to break down the time of day, and each hour listed here is going to indicate the 59 minutes that follow it. So our first hour, where we've had calls into enrollments, was between 9 a.m. and 9:59 a.m. And during that time, we had 11 calls offered. That means that many calls flowed into the queue and waited for an agent to answer. And lo and behold, all of those calls were answered. So 11 calls offered, 11 calls answered. And just by coincidence, the time to answer average seconds, our third column, is also 11 seconds. Okay, so there's no coincidence there. 11 calls answered on average in 11 seconds. Call duration then shows us the total duration of all 11 calls, 36 minutes and 37 seconds, or on average 200 seconds per call. So the first 5 columns here breaking down our answered and offered activity. Okay. Any questions on that so far? As we go down, we can see then where we got more calls. So it looks like our busiest hour was noon with 18 calls offered, 18 calls answered, and then 18 divided by 3 was our time to answer average seconds of 6, right? Halfway there. These calls were only 173 seconds each, so just under 8 minutes. 3 minutes per call. Our last hour of the day, between 4 and 5, we had 9 calls, and they were all answered. Looking at this very quickly, looks like we've only had 1 abandoned. Talk about having just abandoned. At the very bottom, if we take a look at the totals, we had 100 calls offered. 99 of them were actually answered. Average time to answer 6 seconds. Total talk time 5 hours, 46 minutes and 27 seconds, 210 seconds per call on average. Any questions on answered calls? Good, very straightforward. Now, the next 4 columns are going to break down our abandon activity. We have 2 types of abandons that we're looking at, long and short. Now, if you have any call counts in the short abandon column, that's indicating calls that entered into the queue and hung up in 6 seconds or less. And it will tell you what that short abandon average time is. And it will always be under 6 seconds or 6 seconds or less, right? Short abandon calls abandoned so quickly that we're not going to consider them when calculating our service level. So our ASF especially, that shows us the percentage of calls answered. They are not abandoned. They are not affected by short abandoned calls. Of course, here we had 1 long abandon. Now, long abandon is every call that's over 6 seconds in queue. And this one was in queue 198 seconds. So we're looking at 3 minutes, 18 seconds for that particular call. That call then certainly had a negative effect on our ASF, bringing it down to 92% during that hour time frame. So the 1 guy abandoned the call. Any questions on abandons? Total calls interflowed then. An interflowed call you may see in your particular queue when a call is maybe forwarded to voicemail. Okay, the vector rules that are programmed in the phone switch may be set up to send calls to voicemail. Okay, the iCenter queue most certainly does that after a certain amount of time. It also gives callers a choice to go to voicemail, so they can choose to jump out of queue and leave a message instead of wait. You will also see interflows occur in certain situations when a caller RONAs or is re-queued because of an agent not answering the phone when it's ringing with an HCD call. The call is typically flowed out of the queue and sent to another answering point. And again, the iCenter group does have that happen quite a bit, and they have a very specific queue to handle those interflowed calls. For enrollments now, no interflows have occurred. Okay? So if we again scroll down to the bottom, we can see 1 long abandon and no interflows. So out of our 100 calls, 99 answered, 1 abandoned. Any questions so far in this report?
And that's just within that hour, right?
No, well, this is the totals. Okay. So we can see each individual hour, but the totals then for the
Total
day,
for the day.
yeah, 100 calls, offered, 99 answered, and 1 abandoned. All right. Our service levels are in the next 2 columns. Okay. The ASF percentage stands for answer service factor, and it tells me the percentage of calls that were answered. Actually, if I'm a little bit more specific about it, it tells me the percentage of calls not abandoned, which means I can take this percentage, subtract it from 100, and have my exact percentage of abandoned calls for the day. I define it that way because interflowed calls, if you have them, do not count against the ASF percentage, because those calls are handled by something, the switch routing them somewhere else. They did not hang up the phone. Okay? So in this particular case here, if we scroll down to the bottom, you will see, because we've had 1 abandoned call out of 100, our ASF is 99%, okay? Which means we only have a 1% abandonment rate. So that's very, very good. And nice how math is very, very easy to figure out here.
But
Yes?
so the common reporting for that is the abandoned rate, right? Most people don't report out on a dashboard, for instance, on the calls answered. They report out on the abandoned rate.
Okay. Well,
No,
no,
we're not going to see that here. We're going to have to translate that.
Yes, yes. So within task, we show the percentage answered in our software. And so all of our customers do actually report on that. Right? No, I'm just kidding. Anyway, but yes, you would have to kind of calculate your abandonment rate. Again, by simply subtracting that number from 100. You're going for the positive.
I get it.
All right. Any questions on the ASS? Very easy. Just percentage of calls typically answered or not abandoned. So here, 99% answered, 1% abandoned. Now the TSF, the telephone service factor percentage, as it's known, looks at a wait time setting in the administrator for this particular queue. And right now, everybody's TSF time for every queue is set at 30 seconds. It's a customizable time so that we can set it to what your specific service level goals happen to be. Okay, industry standards that are bandied about is 80% of calls answered in 20 seconds. So if you wanted to use that particular service metric, we can change your particular settings to have a goal of 20 seconds. And the TSF will tell you the percentage handled in that time. This particular queue is set to 30 seconds as everybody else's. And so we're showing 96% of our calls are in queue 30 seconds or less. Now, most of the time when people calculate TSF or define TSF or service level, like 80% in 20 seconds, they refer to it as 80% answered in 20 seconds. So answered is the big word there. TSF, though, is generally not calculated like that. It's a little bit more encompassing of all of our calls, meaning abandoned calls and interflow calls will affect this particular metric. So TSF within task is percentage of calls in queue 30 seconds or less. For an example, if we scroll up, we will see right here at the 1 o'clock hour, we had our 1 abandoned call at 198 seconds. Of course, that 1 abandoned call did have an effect on the ASF, the percentage answered, because of abandoned. But that's also where we had one of our knocks here on our TSF, because this call was in queue longer than 30 seconds. Also then, when we look at our 9 to 10 to 11 o'clock hours, these TSFs have a bit of a negative mark down on that, I can say. Not because of abandoned calls, but because of longer calls in queue before answer. Even though the average answer time is 11 seconds or 8 seconds, there was a call in here, or 2 calls, that were in queue over 30 seconds. And so the TSF then went down a bit. Overall then, 96% of all calls were in enrollments 30 seconds or less before answered or abandoned. And that is an excellent mark right there. Okay, so if your goal was 95%, you exceeded it on this day. TFF percent, AFF percent. Any questions on that at all? The last column is labeled average available agents. That's a bit of a mislabel there. It should say average logged on agents, meaning these agents are not necessarily available at any one time. They're not necessarily idle or on the phone. They could be in an unavailable state during that hour. When we take a look at our agent reports in just a little while, we'll see more evidence of that and how we can use this information to really understand how staffing and unavailable agents affect our call activity. But here we can see then how we're staffed, starting off with one person logged in here, okay, and then we're up to 2, then up to 4. Here we have a perfect hour of 4 agents logged in, okay, and then we're down to 4 every now and then. The reason, of course, we're getting decimals here is because out of those 4, somebody's logging off the phone for a little while and then logging back on, right? Okay. So we get just part of an agent during that hour.
But would they really? I mean, maybe those agents behave differently than mine do, but we don't log off during the day. We might opt out.
Yeah, they should be opting out. I don't know if that's
Yeah, no,
calculated.
the unavailable states is not calculated in here. So it could be maybe just somebody logging in for a while or logging off. But yes, typically when you don't have a full agent in there, it's because they weren't logged in the entire time.
We'll be able to see that. Remember that time frame? We'll see that when we do the detail report.
Yeah, if we look at the individual agents, we might see them logging out.
I Center, and they do that a lot. They jump stations. They log in,
Really?
log out, log in, log out, log in, log out.
Log off. During
Sure.
the day?
Yeah.
On
Yeah.
and off?
Yep.
Oh.
So yes. So just keep this in mind that this is the number logged in at any one moment. And of course, knowing how your queue is staffed will help you understand how some of these numbers are affected. In this particular case, just kind of looking at this, there's really nothing going wrong or nothing that doesn't look good, except maybe this one abandoned call here because it was in queue for quite some time. But if we look at that, we had 4 agents on, the maximum number for this queue. You had 13 calls, which was not the greatest number of calls, but it wasn't certainly not the lowest. Your talk times, though, were very long compared to the other times a day. Over an hour and 9 minutes of combined talk time for that hour. And so, it gives us, you know, a possibility, and in this case one happened, of a call being in queue a long time because all 4 of our agents were either on these calls or maybe one of them was unavailable and only 3 were answering calls. And this caller had to wait. Of course, the calls that were answered very, very quickly. Okay, so the length of call and the number of agents did not have an effect on the wait time before the call was answered. Actually, you have your best wait time of the day during this hour here. So kind of weird little contradiction. You would think that would also go up with this because of the talk time being very long. So many ways you can really sit and interpret this data and really analyze what happens. But anyway, we can see the staffing there, and that can certainly have a big impact. When we take a look at our agent group by hour reports, we're going to get even more detail on how agents being unavailable may also have affected these reports. So again, back to our totals at the bottom, 100 calls offered, 99 answered, 1 abandoned, perfect mark, well not perfect, but very, very high marks. Okay, a very, very strong A-B there, I guess, for the TFF percentage. And 2.78 agents logged in at any one moment during the day. This is the key report. You run no other reports if you forget everything that I talk about from this point forward. But remember this, you'll be all right because this is your big number report there. Any questions on the Q reports? I like it. Anyway, so how's our group there that's in GoToMeeting? Any questions? All right, let's go ahead and close our print preview. The next report that we have for enrollments, actually before we do that, let's just compare it to some other departments. Let's jump down to Tang and look at its by-hour report. So same report, of course, different numbers because it's a different department. Scrolling all the way down to the bottom here, we can see that they had 75 calls offered, 74 answered. 27 seconds is our average time to answer, so our average time to answer column. So calls waited a little bit longer, but still on average under 30 seconds. You see our TSFO is very strong. 4 hours, 7 minutes, 22 seconds per total, 201 seconds per call. No abandons for this particular queue. Okay, so every call was either answered, or in this case, they were interflowed. This particular interflow here happened at 20 seconds. So I would be very certain, fairly certain that this happened because of a RONA. Okay, for this particular queue, your RONA timeout is probably 4 rings. 5 seconds per ring gives us 20 seconds. So at this point, a call came in, found an idle agent, but that agent did not answer the call, so it had to follow the redirect on no answer path. Where would the call go here?
Back in the queue.
Back into this queue. Yeah. Okay. Very interesting. So what happens here is that if we look at this particular thing here, when we have RONAs that leave the queue but then come back into the queue, of course they follow another path so they get higher priorities and different messages and things like that. This one call is actually counted twice here under these 3 calls. So it's offered once, interflowed once, offered again, and then answered in this particular case. Okay? So really, out of all 75 calls, there were actually 74 unique calls, and all of them were answered. One, of course, had to just follow a kind of roundabout path there to get answered.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So for this specific queue, I don't have anybody logged on. I think I have one person logged on
Yes.
to take the call.
Yeah,
But this phone number got transferred to an outside center. So is this giving me the report of calls being answered by the call center? Because our number got routed, so we're not the ones answering these calls anymore.
Okay, well, this report is telling me that these calls have been answered in-house within this queue. So there's a queue, skill 80, that is active. People are logging into it, and it's answering calls.
Oh, okay, yeah. I'm sorry, I confused it with advice. I think I saw advice when she scrolled, and I confused it with advice. It's the advice one. So the other one should be
0. So let's go ahead and take a look.
just because I'm
Yeah, there's
curious.
nothing there in advice.
Okay.
Yeah.
Appointments.
That makes sense. So here the question
Yes,
was,
okay. Okay, I was getting a little concerned.
for the advice queue here, calls don't actually get answered. Now there's agents logged into advice, okay? As we can see here, there are agents logged into this queue, but calls never route to it because we reprogrammed and switched route them out. So this report is all zeros, but of course the Tang appointment does have call activity.
That's what I saw the advice.
Okay. All right, so we're talking about the interflow here due to a RONA, and the 20-second time there is very indicative of that. Good thing to know is what your RONA timeout. They're anywhere between 15 seconds to 35 seconds for some different queues. iCenter has a 35-second timeout for 7 rings. Okay, so if you're not sure what your RONA timeout is, ask the administrators here, and they will be able to tell you, so you can know that how to interpret that data. Good. Okay. Last bit then, of course, our service levels. No calls abandoned, so 100% ASF. And at one point, we did have some longer wait times here between 3 and 4 o'clock, and so our TSF went down a wee bit. Still giving us, though, 85.33% total for the day, which is very good. And in this case here, we had a maximum of 2 people logged in at one time. Overall, about 1.5 person logged in. any moment. Any questions on this queue and its call counts? If we scroll all the way to the bottom, we'll have the last queue that we selected, all the way bottom of the index, please. Our CSS HR level 1. And here's all of our call counts there as we scroll down. The day begins at 8 o'clock. In this case, we had 100 calls yesterday for this particular queue. 94 of them were answered. Average time to answer very quick, 6 seconds. 3-minute talk time on average about. We had 6 short abandons. So our long abandons are zeros. So all of our abandoned calls were short. And notice then, throughout the day here, some of the abandons were instant. As soon as they got to the queue, they abandoned in less than a second. And then this guy waited a whole 3 seconds before they gave up. So because all of our calls abandoned in 6 seconds or less, they were all short, our ASF is 100%. These 6 calls did not count against our TSF. So you can really consider this particular report of 94 offered, 94 answered. But these 6 people just didn't give you a chance to answer.
When we do the visualizer later, can we see what those shorts are?
We could. We'll actually be able to see in our abandoned caller report. Okay, so let's take a look here at a next report. First of all, any questions on the basic queue reports? All right. So we had a question here, could we see what the short abandons are? For any queue, we can. We're just going to jump down here in under our CSS level 1 to our by abandoned caller report. This will show us every abandoned call, and here they are. Okay? We can see then they came from Richmond, Berkeley, Oakland, and Burlington, Vermont, and then one was unknown, so it had a caller ID it didn't know. And then the other one was internal from the 59123 extension.
What's interesting is they can't get to, it's not like they can dial directly to that queue. They have to go through the menu, and then you press it and go, oh.
Yes. So yes, exactly. These callers went through an entire IVR to get to that point and then gave up before giving anybody a chance. And again, too, we can look at the visualizer to see some cases where there might have been a case where this first call actually found an idle agent and would have been answered if they hung on there for 5-10 seconds, but did not. And we'll see if that happens. Okay? For a by abandoned caller report, let's go back up to the very top where we had an abandoned call in the enrollments queue. Under that by abandoned caller, here is that person in Berkeley, and they waited 318 seconds. 3 minutes, 18 seconds, which is 198 seconds. Okay. I forget, did we have an abandoned caller in Tang? Let's find out. No, we did not. So very good for Tang appointment, no abandoned. Okay. Any questions on the abandoned caller report? So again, our report real nice. We can just jump from report to report and really analyze our activity. Now, if we just go back to the by DNIS, for our enrollments, if we take a look at by DNIS, it should be empty, yes. If we scroll down to CSS H level R and look at it, right here we show for 71 of the calls, this number was actually the DNIS that was dialed. So a DNIS report by queue, or queue by DNIS report now. Once we have the DNIS numbers all completely programmed, anybody will be able to run this report. And it will tell you what DNIS number was dialed to reach this particular queue. So in this case, 71 calls, the callers had dialed the 510-64649,000 phone number, okay, or whatever phone number says. So is that the actual phone number? Or yeah, that is it. Okay. So that being our number the customer dialed, 71 people called it. Okay. 70 calls were answered. It does give us an average and max wait time of these calls. Okay. the durations there. We had one long abandoned, actually just one total abandoned call here at 3 seconds with a max of 3 seconds and no interflows. So when we have all the DNS numbers that can lead calls somewhere, this will give you a really good idea to know exactly what number people are dialing to reach your business.
Right.
Yes.
Will that pick up the, because that's a VDN number. That's the new VDN. If we 5-digit dial the 49000, we can get to a 2. Will that capture it here, or do we got to put that in the DNS just as a 5-digit?
That's interesting because I did see in the visualizer a call that had a DNS number which was just 49000. So we may have to put it in there separately. Okay.
We want that. And I'm assuming then calls that are made directly to an analyst's phone will not show up here.
They won't show in any of the queue reports because that's a non-ACD call. But it will show in the agent and extension report.
Is there a report that I can print to show weekly, because I got some really bad habits going on with people dialing extensions directly, where I can show the combined total, or am I going to have to do 2 reports? So I can show total work calls coming in.
Yes. So I would say the queue, I would say the agent group report
We'll show that.
will show that. Because that will look at what all the calls the agents took. So it would be all their ACD calls they answered, plus then any non-ACD calls answered. And then all the outgoing calls as well. So, and we'll see that.
The difficulty
Correct
you have
bad behaviors.
You can't tell if it's just me calling your extension, just to chit-chat or go to lunch, or if it's somebody calling the extension to do work.
I'm okay with that.
That's the only drawback.
I'm okay with that.
All right, so the by DNS report here for CSSHR. Okay, if we take a look at the by area code here for this particular report, we can see that calls come from all over the United States, mostly from California, but we get calls from all over the place. The area code report is looking at all the area codes. It is seen in the caller ID. And it's showing you then number of calls offered, answered, abandoned, and interflowed for those area codes. So most of our calls from California, with the great majority from the 510 area code. If we look at the area code in city, this particular report will expand to show cities and states. So Miami, Florida, Gulf, California, Chicago, Illinois, Detroit, Michigan, and so on down the line. These reports are really useful just to kind of understand where your customers are coming from. So if it's a marketing issue or just you want to know where people are. Of course, in the day and age of cell phones, you know, this person from Colorado Springs could have actually been dialing from Berkeley, but their phone is from Colorado Springs, right? Now, some particular groups may not actually have any caller ID because maybe they handle all internal calls, right, from various extensions and so on. Let's take a look. Well, first, let's take a look at the by state report. By state is just a overview, summary of everything. So 67 calls from California. We then had 2 from Pennsylvania and Vermont. The unknown would be the calls that did not have a caller ID, or it could be calls from extension that they were internal. Now let's go ahead and take a look at another queue. If we go to Tang appointment, for instance, and look at its by states and see what we get there. Right. So here, out of the calls that had caller IDs and so on, really it was only California and Ohio. The rest were all unknown for this particular view.
Gio and I think we have a reason why this shows so many unknown.
Okay.
So for most of our medical facilities, they have set up basically their main line is a Centrex line that they then forward to one of our VDNs in the system. And when we watch, like when you watch the live view of this, all you see is that you don't see the caller ID of the person calling. You just see the Centrex VDN that's forward to us.
There you go. So then that's a good reason. If you don't have the caller ID coming through, then you won't have anything to show. And if that seems to be the case for your department, then you can just ignore these 3 different types of reports that they won't tell you. Go ahead to the area code and city and just see if there's anything. Yeah, so there's a couple here that have no labels. There's 740-891 as far as the location too. So one of those was translated as Ohio, I guess. Okay, so the area code, and city by state reports. What are the caller IDs that are breaking in? Now, the by abandoned caller, very useful. We start with tang there and click by abandoned caller. We don't have any calls there. If we go down to our, or up to wherever we like, the abandoned caller here for CSS HR level 1. We'd already looked at that, but here it is again. This is showing all abandons, including the short abandons, and the caller ID for those callers. Now, if we go back up, if we just want to stay here on CSS level 1, if we go to the by hour, scroll all the way back down to the bottom, we will see that our average talk time for this particular queue was 172 seconds. If we now click on the by talk time distribution, it will graph all of our talk times for us. In this particular case, we can see our average would have been like right around here. Okay, so 172 seconds would be about right there. But then notice the calls. Okay, while we do have a good chunk of calls that were shorter, much shorter there, and some just hovering around maybe the 80-second, 90-second mark here. For the most of the calls, they were all very, very unique in their talk time. So the average that we get, while it is an average, might not be really telling us anything that we can use, except that's what the average talk time was. Because all these calls are very, very different, with the shorter calls being, more highly represented. Let's scroll up to the Tang group. So looking at its talk time distribution, we actually see one call exceeded the graph. Okay, this graph can go up to 900 seconds in length, and we can see here then that one call was way out here somewhere. But for the rest of the calls, same kind of case. We've got just very, very unique call times, except 3 or 4, 5 or 6 that might have the same. But overall, again, no real bell curve of talk time. Up at the top, the enrollments queue. Yeah, same type of picture. Do have a bit of a peak for our shorter calls there, but again, calls very, very unique. So this particular report might just be telling you something you already know, that every call is very different, and your agents then will talk as long as they have to answer all the questions the customer has. We have seen with our operators queue this morning where they have a very, very distinct talk time and a bell curve, a very thin bell curve, tall one. That represents that. Very, very few calls deviate from there. Okay, because they're operators, they answer a call transferred somewhere else. That's what they do. So take a look at this report. It can be useful, or it can just be nice to know. Right. Those then are all the basic queue reports. Any questions on what we've talked about? So we're jumping from queue to queue, really comparing and analyzing different information. Of course, you know that the by hour queue report is the most important report to run for queues. Any questions on these reports? Okay. The next reports are spectrum reports. The first one, answer spectrum, is going to break down when calls are answered. If we give a click to that, our time of day is scrolled over at the left-hand side. And then across the top, all of our column headings will break out wait times. Now, this was customized to fit some of the longer talk times. In particular, the I Center has very, very long wait times. I said talk times, I meant wait times there. And some other queues might have very, very long wait times. Okay. In this particular case, our wait times are not very long. We can see them all centered kind of around the 60-second, 30-second mark. This particular report, if we take a look at the columns we have, the first column is the number of calls answered, And then we have the maximum time to answer. So first of all, we can see a couple cases where we had a wait time exceed 30 seconds. Okay, right there and there, and possibly a little farther down. But that's the longest any call waited in the queue during that hour period. And so for the whole day, the longest would be 36 seconds. Now, the first column tells me the number of calls answered in 30 seconds or less. And for the 9 o'clock hour, 9 of these 11 calls were answered in 30 seconds or less. The percentage of total then shows me that 82% of my 11 calls here were answered in 30 seconds or less. The next column shows me the number of calls answered between 30 and 60 seconds. So the number of calls answered is just for that time frame there. And here it's an additional 2 calls. Whereas our percentage then is cumulative. So 9 plus 2 is 11, so 100% of our calls answered in 60 seconds or less.
So Ryan, so in the 60-second column where the 2 is, those 2 are also representative in the 9 under the 30-second? Is that correct?
No. No. So these 2 calls are not here. Okay? These are 2 separate calls that were in queue between 30 and 60 seconds of wait time. And so they're 2 separate calls, and then the cumulative percentage adds them together, giving us 100%. But every column are brand new calls. Okay. Now, looking at this report, the totals at the very bottom. All right, 96 out of our 99 calls were answered in 30 seconds or less. Okay, and then all of them were answered in 60 seconds or less. Our percentage answered in 30 seconds or less is 97% there. Now, a nice thing about this particular report, if you're unsure of what type of service level goal you want, you can use this and you can see where the majority of your calls are being handled. Of course, here in enrollments, 97% of them were answered in less than half a minute, so that's really good. Okay, but if 30 seconds might be too short of a time to really fit your data properly, you might get a good idea of where you can do the best work with that service level goal. Set it there, achieve it, and then start kind of raising the bar to see how much you can improve with your contact center. Also, this report is very useful when you compare the percentage of calls answered within the 30-second time frame versus the percentage of calls in queue 30 seconds, which is our TSF definition. So because people do define sometimes, TSF is percentage answered in 30 seconds or less. I want 90% of my calls answered in 30 seconds or less. Well, this report will tell you exactly that. So here you can say, all right, well, out of my 99 answered calls, 97% were answered in 30 seconds or less, so excellent, you did great. Also, comparing this to your TSF can give you an insight to how abandoned calls and interflow calls can negatively affect your service level, especially if you have a lot of abandons and a lot of interflows. Okay? So keep that in mind, taking a look at that. And if the TSF is a bit lower than the answer service factor or the answer spectrum report, okay, go ahead and use the answer spectrum report. Because that is, hey, that's percentage answered in 30 seconds or less. That's what you asked for. Even though we answered only 5 of the calls out of 300, hey, we answered those 5 in 30 seconds or less. Okay, right up. Okay, no, we don't want to cheat. What could we not do? All right. That's a pretty mellow.
It's after lunch.
Yeah, well, I ate. Okay. Anyway, let's continue. The answer abandoned spectrum report, excuse me, which shows our abandoned calls. And in this particular case, we only have 1, and it abandoned at 198 seconds, which would be over here in the spectrum, between 180 and 240 seconds. This report doesn't tell you a lot if you don't have a lot of abandons. But if you do have a lot of abandons, or if maybe you run this report for a whole month or a year and you have several hundred of abandoned calls, this report can make it very easy to judge where callers get sick of waiting in your queue. Okay? If we just use this one call, I could say, all right, well, people that abandon, they don't want to wait any longer than 4 minutes. So between 3 and 4 minutes, they all abandon at that time, which is what happened. And so what we need to do is we need to fix our vector in such a way that if calls are waiting 3 minutes, we have to do something about that by simply either playing a message, please continue to hold, and somebody will be with you shortly. Or maybe program it to offer another queue for the call to go to, so more agents may answer the call. Or give them a choice to go to voicemail. So instead of hanging up, they'll interflow and leave a message, that kind of thing. So knowing when your callers are going to quit waiting, okay, knowing the time that happens, allows you then to work to capture those calls by programming your phone switch in different ways. And being that Avaya is probably the most powerful ACD and routing system you can do for phone calls, you have a lot of different options there available. Great. Interflow calls then would show us when calls interflow. Again, this particular report here, this particular one has all zeros, I guess, because you did not have any interflows. We had one interflow call in Tang, I think it was. So go ahead and scroll down. There it was. Yep. All right, so it was at 20 seconds. Notice here for the interflow spectrum report, we have different column headings, okay? Because we customized the other ones. These are the default headings, so that's why our 20-second interflow is right here in this column instead of down here. We can customize this, though, if you find you like the interflow spectrum report. If you have a lot of interflows, I know that the iCenter one has the majority of all interflows through the entire business because the nature of their operation is they're spending a lot more time with walk-in visitors than they are answering the calls, because the walk-ins are much more important, and so they address their needs, and sometimes then calls have to wait longer and forward off to voicemail and so on.
Is that a system setting?
Yeah.
Everybody would be under that.
Yeah, so just like the answer and abandon spectrums, this would affect everybody's interflow reports. And I would suggest we probably do that for those guys in the iCenter there. Because otherwise, there's very, very few interflows in the rest of the contact center. Or at least there was yesterday. I'm going off with just pretty much one day's worth of data. We have a lot more data already in it, but this is what we've been looking at. So, all right, so there it is, man, the queue reports. Any questions on the individual queue reports? Now, I mentioned that we can take queues and we can group them together however we would like. So let's just show an example of what a queue group report would look like. So that if you are in charge of multiple departments, so we have 4 different Tang departments, and if you're in charge of all the CSS, where there's like 20 of those.
Somebody just made a question on the...
Go ahead and talk if you'd like to talk over the phone. Otherwise, we could read your question there. Go ahead and maximize this here. Okay. And then scroll down here and chat up to here. First day, yes. Okay, hello. Thanks for the training, Ryan. I missed how you added the spectrum table into the queue report example. Okay, and then scroll down. There's another question there. Ryan, I missed how you added that. And then I'm not on my phone and the microphone is broken. Okay, so she cannot talk to us, but here's a marvel of technology there. Okay, so the question was how we added the spectrum report to the template. Did I read that correctly? Very good. Let's show you how to do that. And we'll also then go about adding our queue group reports to the template as well. If we return to our main reports window, and we can do that by going to just the report section or clicking the daily report link over there. We can edit an existing template by choosing its properties link over at the far right. It will take us then to our main properties window, and at the bottom half we see all the reports that we've got. So when we added that interflow spectrum report, all we had done is we had clicked the edit link next to queue reports. And then we see our 3 different spectrums, including our interflow spectrum reports here. And we had gone under the edit for interflow spectrums and then just selected the by hour choice for those particular reports. So just like selecting any type of reports, you'll just check the spectrum report there and it will appear your template. Now, if we save this, let's take a look at Q group reports. If we choose done one last time, we're back at our main properties window, and at the very bottom, our second choice is Q group reports. So as I was saying, you can group in the task administrator your queues together however you would like them grouped. So if you again are in charge of 5, 6, 20 departments, we can have them grouped together in one single group. So you can get a one-page report on all of that activity. We have one group programmed here, okay, which is our Q group all. Notice that the Q group reports are all the same as your regular Q reports. So same exact options, except we have a Q or by Q report available. So for this particular report, let's go by hour and by Q. Yeah, and just choose save there. And let's go to the answer spectrum, do that by hour, and then save, and then the abandoned spectrum by hour, and save that, and the interflow spectrum by hour, and save that. Okay. All right, we'll choose done here and see what it's done to our template. We'll choose done one last time. So now we have just added some new reports to our template. We're going to go ahead and rerun it in the usual way. All right. If we scroll down now in our index, we'll come across our Q group reports. Taking a look at by hour for Q group all, this will break down by time of day the total call volume of every single queue, all 126 of them that are in the task database. We can break it down by time to see when the entire UC Berkeley call center was busiest. Okay, like probably right here between 9 and 11 o'clock. Okay, there's a little lull during lunch, and then it peaks back up, and then it goes out for the rest of the day. We can see our abandoned activity. We can see all the interflows. And then if we scroll down to the bottom, our totals will show us that yesterday, everything got 1,748 calls offered. 1,528 were answered. The average speed of answer of all calls together was 31 seconds. The average talk time of every call was 184 seconds, just over 3 minutes. Okay, so taking the very short calls from our operators and then looking at the much longer calls in the other queues gives us an average of 184. 91 long abandons, 35 short, with just an abandon time of 1 second. So those short abandoners, if we call them that, don't have any patience at all. And they don't even wait 3 seconds on that. 1 second. 94 interflows here. Those are mostly caused by iCenter in this case, which we will see in the next report, with an average time to interflow of 296 seconds. Service levels then overall, 94.38% of all calls were not abandoned. So you only have an abandonment rate of less than 6%. And then our CSF is not bad at all, 77 3/4. Okay, so that's the entire call volume to the business. And the same then would go through for any group report. Now you can also look at this by queue. All right, so here we can now see every queue that has call activity. So 100 calls for enrollment, and we had 68 main requests offered
If you
there.
have access to these.
Yes, and so
Just the ones you have access to, you'll be able to see.
well, yes. So like you're in the CSS department, so we would create a group for you of all the CSS calls, right? And then enrollment, since you're only in charge of enrollments, you wouldn't need a group because you have just one queue there. But here now we can break them all. So there's Tang Shipping with 216 offered, 211 excellent marks for its service levels. And then so on down the line, we've got one interflow there, which is probably a re-queue. Scrolling down some more, we'll ultimately get to our I departments
you're down that way. It's 7, 8, 8.
There we go. All right, so there we can see 91 interflows. Okay, the big thing there is because they force calls into voicemail, that sort of thing, and then the totals there. So this is the group report. Now, we do see that we had a lot of abandons here. Let's actually go to the abandoned spectrum report for this group. Here it is by time, so we can really see now when calls are abandoning. Now, if we take a look down at our totals, all right, so 91 total abandons with a maximum abandon time of 853 seconds. So somebody was pretty patient before they hung up. 12 calls abandoned in 13 seconds or less. One thing to point out, the abandoned spectrum report only looks at long abandons, so short abandoned calls are not counted here. Okay, then we had 9 abandoned between 30 and 1 minute. Then we had 23 calls here, 15, 13, and then we can see that go up. So looking at this graph, it's right here between the 60-second and 30-second, 60-second. Yes, between the 60-second and 120-second mark is where we have that peak of abandoned calls. So if we look at UC Berkeley as a whole, we know people get sick of waiting about the 2-minute mark, so we have to address that. Now, of course, that's not very scientific because there's so many different departments. But when you focus on your own department, you'll get a much more accurate picture of your callers and their willingness to wait in queue.
Is there a way, so one of the things, like we don't know, you know what those column headers are?
Yes.
We don't yet, and we may get there, but is there a way to request and enhance it to make that header bar free?
It's already been done.
Great.
It just hasn't been added.
Okay, good to know.
Yes.
But I'm assuming for anything else that we wanted to request like that, we would go back through the administrators who would then contact you.
Yes, yes, or you can send an email directly to Task as well. But yes, we always take into account our users' experience and kind of things that they want to see. So a lot of enhancements to the software is based off of user requests. And that one has definitely been requested a lot. So
Okay, good.
when it will be added, I can't say, but hopefully sometime soon. It would make things easier on me as well.
Yeah.
Okay, great. All right, so those are all the key reports. Now, the last report that we added was this notifications report. Okay, what this report again does is it tells me any time during this 1 day or whatever reporting period we use when a call, when the task server may have been turned off and turned back on. We did that last night, and we can see that that happened. The stop happened at 16:26 and 6 seconds, so 4:26, and then it was turned right back on again 2 seconds later. Okay. So looking at this, I know that there was an effect on our reports because task was turned off for 2 seconds. But looking at all the numbers in this time here, the impact is negligible. Okay, you might have lost 1 call in the call counts in some queue. Okay, but it doesn't have any major impact on your interpretation of the reports. Now, of course, if you saw this with the calls, the system turned off for an entire hour or 2 hours, then you're going to look at your report and say, all right, I can't trust all these numbers to make any solid management decisions, so maybe I'll look at another day or just skip this one week. Okay? So that can be very useful if you ever look at the reports and don't trust that they're complete as far as all the numbers. Okay? Does that make sense? Good. Okay, so those are basic key reports. Now, one last thing we can do here, as this was requested before, and of course you'll all want to know that, we can print reports, as I've shown you, using the Prepare to Print link. We can also export reports as well into many different file formats. Now, before we click the export, we can set the preferences of what type of file format we would like to look at. This is done under the Preferences link.
I want to know who's waiting on that call for 14 seconds. 14 minutes, sorry.
Oh, up here.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead and minimize our preferences real quick.
Yeah, so can we see in that and figure that out?
Yes, well, what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our home page.
That's the all queue.
Yeah, so this is the all group. Here's the all group right here. What I've done is I've taken my calls waiting and I set, instead of looking at the caller ID, I told it to look at the queue that the call was waiting in. And so this caller is waiting in the Cal Student Central queue, as is this one and this one and this one and this one and this one, and somebody else down here probably. So there's lots of calls in the queue there. Cal Student Central has gotten very, very busy. And hopefully this guy's, you know, got a speakerphone or something. He's not holding a receiver on his head.
Right. Okay, sorry.
No, not at all. So that's, what can you do? One neat feature there of the calls waiting column is that you can change that second display field to anything you'd like, from caller ID to location to the queue the call is waiting in. And so that's what I selected, because then I can look at every agent through the entire business and then see where all the calls are waiting. Yeah. Okay. Before we go back to our report, we're going to go in here and we're going to set our options for our export. That would be done under the reports section of our preferences, and then under the export options. Under export options, we can select out of the file formats in this drop-down list: comma-separated variable, HTML table, so you can open it up in a browser, tab-separated, Microsoft Excel, excuse me, tab-separated variable, and just plain word processing text. Microsoft Excel is useful because it will create an XLS spreadsheet, but it's an older version. It is XLS, not XLSX, okay? Which means in the latest version of Excel, if we open up one of these Excel spreadsheets, it'll open up in a protected mode. And I found that turning protected mode off is kind of a pain in the butt, because I go to several different things to turn stuff off. So that prevents you from manipulating the report as you might want to in a spreadsheet. So with that said, I recommend always exporting into comma-separated variable, because that can be opened in any table using software, including Excel, and it formats perfectly, and then it opens up with the ability to edit it right away. Let's show you an example of that in just a sec. But first, our time format. We've noticed in all the reports that the average talk time, the average speed of answer time, average time to abandon, they're all a number of seconds, okay? Instead of displaying it as seconds, you could display it in the export as minutes or hours, so a decimal, or as a digital clock, hours, minutes, and seconds, making it much easier to interpret that time. So instead of the call being in queue, 198 seconds, it'll say it was in queue 3 minutes and 18 seconds. Okay? So let's go ahead and select that and choose Save. And then we can close this window. Now, let's go back to our reports and regenerate our report. When you do switch sections, it's going to close off the previous section. So our report was closed, but again, we know we can open it very quickly and easily. So give it a click and set it for yesterday. All right, to export this, simply now click the export button over on the right-hand side. What it will do is open up a window, and it will give you links then to every report that's in the template, okay? So the first set of reports here are for our enrollment skill 55545, and then we see 55565 down here for TANG, and then so on and so forth. The report name is listed over here then, so we can see, here is the Q by hour daily report for our Q71430, which is HR level 1 in CSSS. The name, of course, is a nice cryptic, somewhat cryptic acronym in this particular case: period day, type Q, interval 60 minutes, so it's by hour, and then the Q ID there. So it's pretty easy to understand this. Now, go ahead and scroll all the way to the bottom. Oh, come on, it's pretty easy. This one here, Q group, period day, type Q group, interval by hour for Q group 1. And then interval Q for Q group 1. Now, let's go ahead and open that one. If we click on the link for our Q group by Q daily, it'll ask you, okay, so down here, it'll ask you if you wish to open it up. Go ahead and choose Open. And what it'll do is launch Excel, because that's the only table using the program on this computer. And now I have a perfectly formatted spreadsheet with the date, the ID of the queue, name and nickname of the queue, and then all of our call counts, offered, answered, times answered. Notice now our average durations are shown as minutes and seconds. You can, of course, then change the size of the columns to make it maybe a little easier to read. But because it's in a spreadsheet, you can manipulate this. So say you wanted to reorder this particular report by name. You can sort it by column D there. Okay? Yes, please sort by column D there.
Everybody's watching.
I don't know what.
Just do it.
Okay, and so now it's just sorted it in alphabetical order, and it brought all the rest of that there, so easier to read. Go ahead and sort the offered calls by highest to lowest. Okay, so now I have this huge group here. Okay, so largest to smallest, I can now see the totals at the top, and then who is the busiest queues, all right? So makes it easier to read and manipulate there. And then, of course, you can go ahead and change numbers. So instead of, one band in your interflow, let's erase that and put this 75 and 75. Ha, that looks much better, doesn't it? And then, okay, I'm not going to encourage you to cheat. It doesn't help anybody. Okay, so there is our report in a spreadsheet. Any questions on the exporting? And you'll be able to do this for any of the reports. So if you wanted to do the extension and agent reports that we'll see in a little while, you can export those as well. That's a review of our queue activity in a reporting format. Any questions on that? Just to show you then how, say, weekly and monthly reports would work in a queue standpoint or for any of the reports, let's go ahead and close our spreadsheet. All right, and you can then close our export window, and you can return to our main daily reports. As I said, once you understand how to create daily reports, you will understand how to create weekly and monthly and year-to-date reports. So let's go to weekly and create a report for our queues here. What we're going to do is click New Report Template. We'll give it a name, such as Weekly Report. Interesting thing here, you cannot have the same name for a template under daily and weekly and monthly. Even though it's a separate section, everything's saved in the same file, so it has to have a different name. So giving it a weekly marker there fixes that real quick and lets you know, hey, that's your weekly report. Great. Hit the save button. Okay, same process here. We're going to select some reports. Let's just go to our queue group report for fun. Okay, and we've got our basic breakdowns, again, as you've seen. Here's our queue group. Notice it's all the same options except one new option by queue of, nope, I'm sorry, not by queue, that's not the new option. The by day of week is the new option. By queue group there was always there as well. So let's go by day. Let's also go by hour and by queue. So let's just see all of that. You go ahead and hit save. And that's fine. This will be a good example. So there you are. We've created the template in the usual way. Our template is here under the weekly section. And now to run it, it asks us to select the first day of the week. Now, all of our weekly reports are Sunday through Saturday. So what it's asking you to do is select the Sunday of the week you wish to run it for. However, if you don't know when that Sunday is, if you select a date within the week, Task will figure out what the first Sunday was. So for instance, if you go ahead and in the drop-down day there, select the 5th and hit View, you'll notice here that the Sunday before the 5th was the 1st. And so now here is our report for the entire queue group for the week of January 1st through the 7th. The first report is an entire weekly report by hour. You can actually run the monthly report by hour as well. And this is useful because if all days are pretty equal as far as their call volumes, you know, they start in the morning, they got a peak here, they slow down during lunch and so on. This will give you a really good picture of that, where you're getting your peaks and valleys throughout the report. So we have our morning peak here, okay, at 10 a.m., a little bit of a lull during lunch, and then a big peak here from 1 o'clock, and then it slowly fades. Jumps down big at 4 o'clock, and then we're done by 6, okay, with the last straggler of calls here. All right. Our totals then are at the bottom for the entire group. 6,469 offered, 5,320 calls answered. Average speed of answer 34 seconds. Average talk time 3 minutes and 17 seconds. 486 long abandons, 136 short, whole bunches of interflows there, and pretty respectable marks. Our abandonment rate's a little bit higher than usual, so our answer rate was only 91%, so we've got a 8 and some odd percent abandonment rate for this entire week. A little bit high there. Our TSF is not so bad though, okay, 2%. All right, so there's the whole week, and here again we can see our peaks and valleys. There's our totals. To look at the totals by day, then of course we can click on it by day. And here we can see now that of course Sunday and Monday we were closed, although Saturday you were open with 163 calls being handled by the whole business, 102 of them being answered. Our busiest day of the week, of course, was Tuesday, right after our New Year's holiday. 1,829 calls, 1,501 answered. Okay. And it looks like it was that Saturday that kind of goofed up our average, a day with much higher wait time, so it brought this average up a little bit. Longest talk time seems to be around Wednesday, but it's not that much longer than all the rest of it. Very interesting. Weekend calls were much shorter, but all the rest of the calls, overall, very close together as far as times. Okay? And then so on and so forth down the line there. So, the whole group. And if you look at it by Q, then you can see the totals for every Q there. Yes. All right. So, Q group reports by week. Monthly reports, same, except it's going to be 28 to 31 days in length instead of just 7 days or 1 day. So feel free to play around with that, of course, when you're using the task software. You can't break anything as you're using it. You'll just get some good experience on there. All right, so what we're going to do is we'll take a break till about 3 o'clock, so about 10 minutes here. You can stretch the legs, some more coffee or water, whatever you need to do. We'll come back and then we'll talk about the agent reports and our visualizer tool. Break. And break.
I'm going to be handing out a, for those of you on the phone, I'm going to be sending you the training evaluation form. If you just give us some feedback and you just email it back to me, I appreciate it. Those of you in the room here. We'll be on for a while before you exit today. Thank you. What time are you leaving? 4. 4, okay.
We did that update yesterday.
I see him in there. I don't see him on mine. So I'm chatting with Erica Luber. She's our report person. She can see him. I can't.
They may have, what, did they not? They may have not given you all the, because Gio's been going down and like checkboxing who gets what.
So if I go to here and I try to change And I tried it before I said, can't see.
Yeah, if they're not in the group, they didn't check while they must have missed some of them.
Oh,
Oh. Well, that's because, yeah, because some are named CSS, some are named other things. Do you know them by skill number? That's one of the things we have to
I don't
learn.
know them by skill number. I know them by like CSS. Like I could see them up there.
Mm-hmm.
Like the CSS. A lot of them start with CSS IT,
Uh-huh.
and then business apps or desktop and infrastructure or what is it? Desktop technical services.
All that, yeah.
Something like that. Caltime. But they all start with CSS IT.
Okay.
Like this one. Right? So they all look similar to this.
Mm-hmm.
So they're probably somewhere around that skill number.
Yeah. So he must just missed some of the.
Gio, did you go on break already?
Yeah, he's been doing stuff. There's problems going on over it.
Yeah, I'm here. There you are.
He's on mute. What's up, Gio?
Hey, guys. Oh, yeah, I want to make sure that, I guess we'll do a breakout meeting. I'm going to put, if we have another training, our training tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that training, I guess tomorrow, Thursday, I need an hour, maybe 30 minutes just to do some internal stuff.
Yeah.
I'll put that on the calendar for Thursday.
Since we got Ryan, I think we'll do something.
Ryan leaves Wednesday.
I leave
What do
on
you
Thursday.
leave, Ryan? You leave
Thursday, yeah. So we have something scheduled for tomorrow, so that's actually interesting.
That's
So your schedule, your agenda, you show you put on the administrative training for the morning.
That's for internal.
Okay, so we want to do that again.
Worker bees, yeah.
Okay, because we had the web administrative stuff, so we just want to go through that again.
All right. And then provisioning.
And then what?
Provisioning. Like we've been doing password changes and we'll go over it.
Oh, yes, talking about the users and manipulating
Yeah,
that.
making sure we're in the right skill set, we need to add them. Yeah, take a look at that.
Yes.
Can we look up Sally's?
60.
She's short.
Oh.
She's short a couple groups.
Yes, okay, so.
What's the nearest like coffee place?
Across the street, down the corner of the house.
Sally's Maker.
The one by the Japanese? Is that a Japanese
I
restaurant?
don't know what it is.
Oh,
Anything that
I
says
need that fix, so I know where to go.
first.
yeah.
Including these or no?
No.
That's convenient.
Usually they're towards the bottom.
Yeah, that's
Sorry,
the
which one?
house or no. No.
No?
No,
You don't
it
want that
should
one?
say CSS.
Oh, see.
That,
CSS IT, sorry.
okay, well, how about CSS, Econ, and Box?
No, but general
But general
issues,
issues
what the
you
heck
want?
is that? That's already allowed.
I know, I just allowed that one.
Oh, okay.
All right,
We'll just keep scrolling.
Keep going, look for CSS IT like that.
is this one?
I don't know
That's
what
probably
that is.
not anything Q-late. I think that's not really cute. How about there's another Q? Okay, so HR Gold, Network Access, those two there, all right. How about all these Q-late desktop support,
IT desktop support, yeah.
IT counseling, IT business application,
Yep,
voice network,
yep,
This, yeah.
yep.
CalMail, or
What, help me with it.
That might be an old one. This system's been built upon at least 4 times.
okay, so that's all of them. So choose, just make sure the agent groups are added. Yes, in there, all right, okay, and update. All right,
If you
So
log
should I
out,
log
back
off?
in. Yeah.
yes.
Oh, here it is. Where's the guy now?
Now, when you build a group,
A Q group.
a Q group, how do you restrict that? Is there a...
Yeah, so let's build a cube here. So if I go now, I call it 2, and I call it CSS. All right, so I'll go through this here, and I'll add all
To do these kind of requirements.
yeah. Let's say chart hold, network access, security, CSS software access, IT desktop support, contract, IST, did you say that was one?
No,
No.
that's one.
How are you guys doing, Sister Move?
Busy.
Okay, so now update this, now you have this group, so what
There's
we'll
a few
do
phone
then is
things that
under
I
users.
asked them another, but the 2 phones we ended up canceling last minute. They're ready to move Friday.
Under your
So,
resource
we're
permission,
supposed to have probably
groups will
more
be
than-
at the
well,
bottom.
it's only 2 phones,
Oh,
but
okay, so it's
Ron did a lot of,
okay.
like, last minute moving around.
Okay, yeah, he's good at that.
Yeah, no, he's just a phone call away.
Part of that a lot.
Yeah.
He's there all the time fixing something else, and when I see him, I said, hey, Ron,
So now you can run a report on that group.
He was
and
gonna,
see all
we
CSS
needed
stuff.
the interpreter, number, program to all the phones, and they
What
were
we'll do
already
is we'll send out a
programmed,
thing to,
but
so that you guys can,
one,
you can have
like,
Josie.
the other Altel side, that has, I
identify.
guess, a number of these, and then primary care. Some of the numbers that were
Different
in primary
departments.
care were Altel numbers, so we didn't have the right access code to it.
Wasn't sure where
So
you
they're
were
trying
with
to
that.
figure out.
Now I know. Good to know.
So we're working,
That won't be
making
good.
the best out of it.
We just need a list of what supervisors need what Q groups, because I'm sure you have, you know, the HR wants their Q group, and business finance
She
wants.
is supposed
And here we are with the CSS group right here. So it looks like several of the CSS ones don't have any calling, but then there are the ones down here, desktop, IT, contact.
Yeah.
So here's the new ones we're granted the access to. So we can talk to it there. But now you can run a report on this group, and then you'll be able to monitor this as well.
This is going to be good for me for cleanup, so I can go figure out.
the zero.
Yeah, are they really used or not?
Yeah, IT generalist, never heard of it. And the skill is not even close to the ones that we use. So I just noticed the ones we just added were in the 500s, like 5, 90, 91, 90, 93, 95. So what's in 91, 92, 93? Right? See how it skips over the skills down there?
Yeah, then, well, that's just a number, right? So
Right, but it looks like somebody probably put them in order when they were putting the group in.
Yeah, well, so just when I build stuff, it's like you want to try to make it match. So a lot of times, you know, you'll come down here, well, 594, for some reason they made 71594 being an
Something
output.
else. Oh, I
And
see.
so I can't use it, so I'm like, so I try to find stuff that to make sure so it matches, and in my head it makes it.
yeah, and overall most of those are, but then you get into some. Well, actually, these all seem to be that. If we take a look at the database, we'll actually see.
Every once in a while there is some goofy ones in there.
Yeah, like 55560 skills 63.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
some of these are off
This
like
is-
the one.
And this is how these are all built probably 6 years ago.
Prior.
These are way old. Some are used, some are not, some are. It's just kind of a thing that needs to happen. And when we're going to start reaching out to every department, sitting down with you guys, and kind of going over. Okay, so now we have a new reporting system. Let's look at your skills. Let's see what can we do better. What can we help you with? Just different ways we can build it into your flow. Okay.
I need to try to get, and I think I sent out an email before and maybe not here, I don't know who has helped with it, with somebody internally, just because I needed to get a report on the calls coming into that number. the 64, the advice number, whatever number it is. That number, how many calls, or how many people, the amount of people that are calling that number. We might not be able to track it on there because there's nobody logged on to the queue and they're being transferred somewhere else. But are we able to capture the number of people that are calling?
If it comes to me through the phone system, then I can capture it.
It wasn't showing anything there.
No, because it's probably a Centrex number that they're forwarding something. So we would want to convert that into a PBX number, have it come into the system. We can get tracking off of it. We can get all the DNAs. We can do all the stuff we've been seeing, and then still build a path to forward it out to your other, wherever you want to go.
Yeah, that's one of the things I need to try to track is how many calls this other call center is answering for us. Yeah. What the volume is we compare to the volume that they're doing compared to the volume we had last year.
We had that question with CSS for their after hours, same kind of thing.
Yeah, so they used to be our after hours only, but they took over all day long.
Yeah.
So specifically for our advice line, this call center is taking all the calls all day long.
But you have to get the report from them.
They run a report on their calls, but I thought they wanted me to find out if there was a report we can run about how many calls are, like, calls received that their report says that they actually took.
Right, you want to see if you got 40.
Yeah, right, exactly.
They're saying, no, we did 50.
Yeah.
Say, well, we only had
Really, take it 40.
Yeah.
Just
because we're getting mixed reviews from patients and from staff saying, oh, well, this person said she called, but she's calling us through a different number, and she said we couldn't get through, so we want to see what's going on, where the disconnect is.
Yeah.
And it's hard to tell without having that data.
Yep.
Right. We're back. It's 3 o'clock, so let us continue.
So send a request to SORNet.
Okay.
All right.
Anybody else want water?
Margaritas.
Yeah.
Yeah, boy.
Almost hit.
It's 5 o'clock in Milwaukee.
I would've
Wisconsin.
There you go.
5 o'clock somewhere.
Snowy and nasty.
5 o'clock
Yeah,
somewhere.
it's raining actually today, so it snowed a bit yesterday. And
So it's
raining
hotty.
today. It's not cold enough to be icy yet, but if it does drop, everything will be terrible.
Is that where you're from?
Yes, yeah, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So while I'm enjoying the warmer weather here, the rain is a hassle. But
It was warm.
it hasn't been, actually the rain hasn't been too bad, because both nights I did manage to go out without it raining on me. The rain stopped. Today it's raining too much.
Yeah, so you can come to California and you're hearing our biggest storm of the year.
I know. Might be best weather.
Yeah, it's like, and then it gets dark real early too in the winter, so if I haven't had an opportunity to wander around the campus or really see things that are going on, I'll still have to make a trek out to Eva Records, do some shopping there and stuff just to see that, but yeah, so it's just more of just kind of evening, sit in a hotel room, that kind of thing.
Uber.
Oh, well, yep, Uber.
Beautiful thing.
I took Uber here this morning instead of driving, so I wouldn't have to go out in the rain to constantly pay for the parking. So, and it actually is a little bit cheaper too, compared to where I'm at. I'm $9 per hour parking, so that works out. So yeah, we'll see what happens. No worries there. It's been good to spend the time here with the training and so on. Okay, so there's an aside. We've talked about Q reports. As we're back here, anybody got any questions on Q reports? Okay, well, let's return to our daily report template, just what we did, and let's create a new one to review what our agents have been doing. So we're going to create a new report template. We might call it Agent Report. We might call it My Employees. We might call it CSS Employee Reporting or CSS Agent Call Activity. Okay, the name is up to you. Once the name is there, you can choose Done, and now we're here under our Q reports, or our report properties. The third option down is Agent Reports. If we give that a click, we'll see there are 3 types of agent reports: our basic reports, our aux work reason reports, and then our ACD hold reports, which will tell us how often agents place answered calls on hold and for how long. So starting with our basic reports, When we click edit, in this particular case, I am presented with all 255 of the agents in our task database. But of course, everybody else will be limited to their own agents, making it much easier to parse this list. So let's just throw out a couple names here of people that worked yesterday. I think Theodore did. Great, well then let's select a report for him. Our agent reports are broken down by time, quarter hour, half hour, hourly, again, depending on your level of detail you prefer. We'll go with our by hour report. And let's also do the by queue report, which is super useful if the agent answers for multiple skills. Okay, so like CSS, you might have the same people across multiple queues. You can see exactly what queues they take calls from. But even if they only answered for one queue, it will tell you the transfer and the re-queue activity for that agent as well. Let's go ahead and select maybe a couple others just for examples. So if there's any agent we would like to see data for, just yell out his name. Again, this is a very long list, but Control F would allow us to search it very easily for a name or number.
David Lee. I'm sure.
David Lee, all right. And just one more person.
If you have to do a control Portillo, Evelyn Portillo.
There we go.
That's going to be my new friend.
Okay, now let's remember these three individuals because we want to select their corresponding box work reason and ACD hold reports. So all right, we're going to choose save. Box work reason reports would show you the reason codes used by the agents when they go into box. Now if you're not using reason codes just yet, okay, we can still use this report to see the number of times they put themselves into aux and the aux times per period. So it still can be rather useful. Let's go ahead with Theodore Mack and then the other two individuals. Yes, please, by hour. You'll notice that this report then is by time. Okay.
David Lee.
There he is. 79068, okay. And then for the same three agents, let's do our ACD hold report. Now, ACD hold reports are broken down by time, quarter hour, half hour, an hour. And then we have our hold drop report. So let's do that third and fourth checkbox for our three agents. The hold drop report is very similar to the agent, to the abandoned caller report for the queue. And that what it will do is show you the full caller ID and a time to drop for any call that was placed on hold and hung up before the agent retrieved them. Brilliant. All right, so there's our basic agents. Now, before we click done, let's add our agent groups to this. So not only can we see the agents individually, but we can see the same exact reports. Notice the report types are the same. And we can do it then for the whole group of agents. Okay? Now, point out here with our groups. Okay? All of the groups in the task database right now are based on the agent assignments for their skills. And so they're named as such. In the task database, the queue itself is going to have a corresponding group with the same ID of agents. But the group report does not actually relate to the number or name. Okay? The group report and its totals is based solely on the activity, the total activity of the agents in the group. So regardless of what the name is, okay, it's going to show you everything that those agents in the group did. This is important then when you're selecting groups, especially if, say, you're in charge of CSS. You have all of these groups here. You might be in a situation where some of these groups are very identical as far as their members, or maybe they are identical, the same exact agents answering for multiple queues. Well, in that case, you won't have to run all of the agent groups. You can just pick one and look at that. Because if I have 3 agent groups with the same people in them, those 3 agent groups will have the same total activity, regardless of what their ID and their name is. Does that make sense? Okay. So the group is based on, not by the name of the queue, but based on the member's activity. And again, also remember that we can request of our IT department here to create agent groups and group them together however you would like, so you can get a one-page report of all your people, or by shift, by experience, by partner, whatever you like. So keep that thing kind of in mind. And again, also, if you have agents that are in multiple queues, okay, their agent activity will be the same in every group. Okay. Good, so let's select. We'll start here with enrollments. The options we have for our agent groups are by time, quarter-hour, half-hour, and hourly intervals. So let's go ahead and do that. Then we have by queue, which will tell us what skill the group answered for, or skills. By agent, so we can compare the individual agents together. And then by queue by agent. So for that particular queue, or group of agents, excuse me, any other group of agents we'd like to review, we could do Tang appointment. Okay. Let's do those last 4 check boxes there. And then we could do CSS level 1 if you'd like to. Any other group of agents anybody would like to see? All right. In the same way, then, we could do our aux work reason reports for the group. And here, just for our examples, let's go ahead and just do the aux work reason for enrollments. Okay. Here it can be broken down by time and by agent. And then we can do the hold for the entire group as well. Okay. So this will give us an example here, and then you can choose, if you like these reports, make sure you select them. Run them. All right, so there we are. Another new template created. We're going to choose done, and done one last time, and we now see our new agent report here. Of course, to run it, we choose the template name, we choose the date, and view it. All right. Any questions, again, on how we're building templates? Very, very simple to do. Go ahead and build as many as you like. All right, so here's Theodore Mack. We see that our guy, Theodore Mack, logged in at 8:40 a.m. He logged into Zachary West's phone at 49255. Okay. But that's where he logged in. We see that he logged out at 4:26, logged back in at 4:26, and then out at 5 o'clock. Spending a total of 8 hours, 19 minutes, and 15 seconds logged into his phone. Now, to point out here, if you remember our notifications report, it showed us the task was turned off at 4:26 and turned back on 2 seconds later. That's why these log in and log out events are here. If the task system is interrupted or turned off on the server side, task will automatically just end a report and give us a timestamp for that agent as a logout. And when it's started back up, and we get the new login events just telling us again, hey, these people are still logged in, we'll log them in. It's not forcing the agents out and back in at all. It's just labeling it in the report. So every agent that worked past 4:30 on this particular day, okay, they're all going to show this because it affects the whole thing. Right? But we can then see the rest of this agent's activity here up until 5 o'clock when they finally logged off, and had 8 hours, 19 minutes of shift time. Again, his phone is named Zachary West. And we then see the call activity. This agent answered a total of 15 AC calls, with his busiest hours between 9 to 10, and then between 2 and 4 o'clock, with 3 calls per hour each. The total talk time was 1 hour, 34 minutes, and 54 seconds, or 380 seconds per call. These are your queue calls here. Non-ACD calls then, one non-ACD call that lasted 22 minutes and 30 seconds. Notice here, notice how we have this one call, but here then we have 0 calls, but there's 12 minutes duration. That's because this one call went over the 3 o'clock hour. Okay, so it started 10 minutes and 28 seconds before 3 o'clock, and then went another 12 minutes after. Okay, so there it is with our total length of time. Outgoing calls, you made 4 of those. They were only 6 seconds each, okay, at 25 seconds, and we're going to talk about that again in just a moment. So there's all the call activity for Theodore. He has no time in do not disturb them, an hour 56 in auxiliary work, 8 seconds of not ready time. And not ready time is when you simply have your phone off the hook and it's not doing anything. It's not connecting to a phone call or anything. It's just off the hook. And you shouldn't have more than a minute or two of that if you have that long per agent per day. If you do see a very long not ready time, you'd want to look into that person's phone and find out if there's a bug in it or something like that. Work time then is our after call wrap. So after an hour and 34 minutes of talk time, he had an additional 28 minutes of work time related to those ACD calls. Important to know that time and combine it when staffing, because they have to do that much work, the talk time plus the after call work. And of course, the rest of his time was spent idle, nearly 4 hours. So that's a basic agent report, straightforward. Now, things again to understand with our agent report. We talked a bit about this when covering our review. If we add all of our duration fields together, it will equal exactly 8 hours, 19 minutes, and 15 seconds. So that tells me that none of these calls, times, or state times overlap, right? They're all very separate. So the first consequence of that is when we scroll up and we see outgoing calls that have no duration. What that indicates to me is that this outgoing call occurred, these 3, while these ACD calls were on hold. Now, not all of them, but a few. Meaning the agent answered an ACD call, placed it on hold, and then made an outgoing call or 2. Because it's happening at the same time, we only cover the call time here for the original call. This allows us to see the exact true amount of time this agent was on the phone. Now, outgoing calls with unique talk times are unique calls. Okay, so that's a unique 25-second call that he made. Now, don't worry. We are going to show you the true total talk time in the next agent report, because that by-queue report does not concern itself with shift times at all. Now, to go along with that, because these don't overlap, when we look at aux or after call wrap time, we know the agent was in these states and not using the telephone. Because if, say, a person put himself in aux, they can still make outgoing calls and they can still receive direct inbound calls. And if that occurs, we will count those calls and their time as calls in talk time, not as aux time as well. Okay, now the Avaya actually does that. It will calculate the aux time and the talk time at the same time. Task, I believe personally, that is more accurate, because now we know for an hour 56 minutes he was in aux and doing no phone work at all. Okay? We really know the time they're spent unavailable and not on the phones. So, okay, right? So there we go, agent report. Let's jump down to our guy, David Lee. All right, so here's David Lee. He logged in at 8:03 a.m., so he was 3 minutes late. I'm going to talk with him about that tomorrow. Or not. Jeez, man, come on, wrap it up a little bit, right? Fine, okay. He logged off again. We see it for our chance there, and then for the day at 16:28. Again, logged into his phone, 8 hours, 24 minutes. 15 calls. Notice his calls are very long, 582 seconds on average. Some of them are very long indeed. Okay. No non-ACD calls and 17 outgoing calls for 55 minutes there. So it doesn't look right here as if he had any transfers or calls done on hold. They all look separate from this particular report. So again, we can see his activity on the phone is almost 3.5 hours, maybe a little bit less hours. He spent 2.5 hours then in aux, 27 minutes, 21 seconds in work time, and then 2 hours idle. Our last report is for Evelyn. If we look at her by-hour report, we can see her logging in at 8:01. Here she logged out at 1:07 and came back at 2:14, so it took a little bit longer lunch than she may have. We see, she's away from the phone that time, so there we go. And of course, here's our reset, and then she logged off for the day at 4:43, spending 7 hours, 35 minutes logged into the telephone, handling 33 ACD calls for 2 hours of total talk time, 3 non-ACD calls, 39 outbound with a combination of true outbound and transfers or calls on hold anyway. Hour 46 in aux, 3.5 hours in idle, and then only 4 minutes and 51 seconds of work time. Okay, so her work time, she doesn't really use a lot of it, even though she has many, many calls. Okay, so it's either a very, very short ACW time, or she's just kicking herself out because she doesn't need the time there. Awesome. So those are individual by-hour agent reports. Any questions on that at all? All right. Let's take a look at Evelyn. We'll continue with her, and we'll take a look at her by queue. So where did her 33 calls come from? They all came from the Tang appointment skill. Okay. Now here, let's actually do something. Go back to the by-hour report for me, please. All right, and scroll to the totals. Okay, so the totals here for the outgoing calls. Notice it's 3 minutes and 46 seconds. Okay. If we go into the by queue report, our outgoing calls are showing 8 minutes and 32 seconds. That's much longer. Of course, why is that? Well, back in our by-hour report, we noticed there were several times where she was making outgoing calls while ACD calls were on hold. And in the regular agent report, we don't overlap the times. Here, we don't care about shift times, so we're going to tell you just the true talk time on an outbound call. So you can then really see about what's reported in the first report that has all the calls that occurred during ACD calls, and then how long those calls actually lasted. So we're adding, about twice as much talk time in the outbound duration. Does that make sense to everybody now?
While you're standing here explaining it, yes. Weeks from now, when I look at that and I say, what the heck?
Now you can remember it.
So is that calls she's making out to the non-AC or the ACD phone?
Oh, well, where she's calling, we don't know just yet. When we take a look at her extension report, we will. Okay, but as far as the calls, if we just go back to our by-hour report, okay, these outgoing calls, like right here, these two, and that one, and this one here, okay, and probably several of these, okay. Those, again, are all occurring when the ACD call that she was involved in was placed on hold. So who she's calling, I don't know from this report. She could be transferring the call. She could be simply calling somebody to get some information and then returning to our agent. We'll take a look at her by call detail report, and it'll actually show us then that exact information. All right, so by queue report. Again, to continue with the by queue report, again, we see the top row is strictly your non-ACD and outgoing calls, because those occur regardless of what queue you're logged into. Of course, they only took calls from the Tang appointment, 33 of them. Notice that over here, this particular agent caused 12 requeues on this day. Okay. So 12 times she was presented with an ACD call and did not answer it.
So the rollover.
Yes, the RONAs, redirect on no answer, exactly. She also then transferred 6 of her Tang appointment calls away from her phone. Okay. So there were 6 outgoing transfers of Tang appointment calls, which is why it's in that row. Okay, any questions on that? So the by queue report. We'll see this again in just a moment with our groups. aux work reason. So our girl here spent a bunch of time in aux, hour and 46 minutes worth. We can see that she has no codes except the generic code 0. So when you start using aux work reason codes, it'll have new columns for each code. And then it will show you how many times she used that code and for how long.
David or COU?
Oh, okay. Maybe we'll jump back up real quick to Theo. Let's see if David. Right? David did not use any on this day, and neither did Theo.
But they do.
Well, they did not. Okay, now, of course, we don't have them all programmed in tasks, so that might be it. Although usually if they use a particular code, it should show up, but that could be it just because they're not all programmed in tasks yet. Okay. Anywho.
Because I yell at them when they don't.
So we'll have to make sure we get those added to tasks so we can start monitoring that activity and really breaking it out in the report. Let's go back to Evelyn here. She had more activity, but what we see for each particular user is how many times they placed themselves into Ox. So she went into Ox 19 times. Now 12 of these times that she went into Ox was because of the Ronas she caused, okay? Because that automatically forces you into Ox so that you're not offered another call. And what's interesting here, and it'll be much more apparent when she's using other codes, because then Ox 0 will be strictly Rona calls. You can see how many times she was put in it, but more so how long did she stay unavailable until she then went back to work. Okay, so if you're forced into Ox and then you sit there for 27 minutes, okay, you're not going to be getting any calls at all. So when you cause Ronas, okay, everybody must make sure that it happens. And if it does happen, they want to make sure they take themselves out of Ox so they can continue taking phone calls. Okay, so make sure they're aware. So Ox work report, 19 times here for Evelyn. We saw with Theo, he put himself in 5 separate times. Okay, ACD hold by hour. We can see that this particular report looks very, very similar, at least the first half of it, to your basic agent report. So log in, log out time, shift time, extension you're logged into, and then our ACD calls. Then we have our total ACD holds. Okay. Here we see that she put calls on hold 12 times. It's not 12 separate calls, it's 12 separate hold calls. So it is not uncommon to see more holds than actual answered calls, because they could be putting those calls on hold multiple times, right? So there's our volume, but even more important is how long these calls were on hold. On average, the calls are on hold about 77 seconds, or that's because of the first average holds here, okay, which were very long, boosting up that average a bit. But her total was 15 minutes. Now, even though this has a shift time here, we are not, again, considering overlaps. We know, of course, that the hold calls is part of the ACD duration because they're putting the call on hold during the call, right? Of course. And so when you look at this, you know that this is a chunk of time, a quarter of, well, not a quarter, about an eighth of this 2 hours right here. So out of the 2 hours of talk time, 15 minutes of it was calls on hold. And so you want to make sure that this is not too excessive, okay? Now, of course, calls have to be put on hold and transferred, and you have to get information to answer calls. And so it's going to happen, but make sure it's not too long, because the longer the call is on hold, the longer the agent is on the call. And the longer they're on the call, the longer they're not idle and able to take the next call, which means that next call waits in queue really long, and then it abandons. Service levels go down, and then the supervisor's not happy, and then somebody gets fired, and then they can't afford to go to the concert they wanted to, and then everything is a mess, right? Not bitter. So, oh God, I'm not going to try anymore. Come on, people. The best stuff here, all right. I even have a stick, okay? All right, so jokes don't go, but you understand what I'm pointing out here. Must manage time on the phone so we can make sure service levels are good, customers are happy, everything runs efficiently. Okay? That's why we're here. Now, last column over here, interesting, we see one. There's a hold dropped, okay? The hold dropped means that one of these people that were on hold on the phone before, our agent Evelyn, came back to retrieve it. If we look at our hold dropped report, we will see that that caller, it doesn't show up, so it doesn't have any data here for this particular call. Otherwise, it would have shown us the caller ID for that particular individual. that's kind of weird. It doesn't have any data for that, but it's there. So, yeah, what we'll do is we'll take a look at our visualizer very soon. Well through this, so there's something, a good example. Okay. Agent reports. Any questions on the individual agent reports? All right. The next type of agent report is the agent group report. Our first group we selected is enrollments, and if we look at it by hour, we will see the breakdown by time of day for our entire group. For each hour of the day, we're going to show you the shift time, which is the combined shift of all the people that are logged in. So notice between 10 and 11 o'clock, we had 4 hours of shift. So we had 4 hours of, or 4 logged in agents. Again, available is a bit of a misnomer because they're not necessarily available. They could be unavailable, as we will see. When we have less than a full person in here, it just means that in this particular case, one person was only logged in for maybe 34 minutes or whatever the combination was. ACD activity then is broken down by hour with our totals at the bottom. Okay. Non-ACD then and outgoing calls as well. Here, notice our auxiliary work by hour. Okay. So why is this very important, especially when we compare this to our queue report to look at wait times of calls in queue and abandons and so on. Again, when I say here, this is average logged in agents. Notice right down here, the very last row, we have 4 people logged on for this hour, but 2.5 hours of that hour there, 2.5 hours of time, was spent in aux. That indicates then that only 1.5 of these agents was actually answering phone calls during that hour. Now, they answered 12 calls. They also had very long talk times. Okay, so during this time frame, we might have had, more abandons and higher wait times. I don't remember from our queue reports off the top of my head, but that's the kind of thing you will see. So when you have people logged in, they might not all be taking phone calls, and that's important to know. And when you start seeing, the patterns of wait times and so on, you might need to change when people are taking breaks or doing off-phone work and that sort of deal to address phone calls and those needs. And then the rest of our information, our idle time there for 10 hours, in total of 30 hours of shift time. Okay. Now, if we take a look at this group here by queue, we will see that our enrollments agents answered only enrollments calls, as they are wont to do, 99 of them. Are again non-ACD and outgoing calls up in the top row. We can see there were 4 total requeues for the entire group. We'll find out more about that in just a moment. Okay, but 4 times agents caused RONAs. There were 20 outbound transfers, so 20 of the 99 answered calls were transferred somewhere else. So our by queue report. Now the by agent report, we'll take a look at all the agents that worked in the queue and show us their individual totals, and then allow us to compare them. First of all, we see the agent's ID and name. We see their shift time, so how much time they worked throughout the day. So the longest worker was Dina here for nearly 9 hours, and Richard was the shortest shift time of 6.5 hours there. You can see he logged in a little bit later than everybody else, logged out though around the 5 o'clock hour. Of course, they logged off at 4:30. Okay. Each agent then shows their ACD calls that they took, and then we have a new column in here called average per hour. Okay. This allows us to see, is there a pretty equal distribution of calls? And in this particular case, yes, it does seem pretty close, 3 to 4. Not as many for Felicia, but she might be spending more time in aux than everybody else, and that does seem to be the case. Okay. All right, so that she doesn't have as many calls as everybody else does. We have another new column here called percentage of shift. So looking at the amount of talk time compared to the shift time, we're going to see how much of that day the agent is spending on ACD calls. We have Richard here spending 30% of his day on ACD calls, which is much higher than everybody else. Okay? Dina and Joshua here are pretty equal. Okay? And that's all going to be based on the talk times and the volume of calls. Okay? So we got our guy Richard spending more time because he's taking about as many calls as everybody else, 4 per hour there. But his talk time is the highest out of all 4 there, and so it's going to take up more of his day. Overall, though, the entire group spent 19% of their time on ACD calls. Now, they have very few non-ACD calls, so its percentage is 0. And then we have 1% of the day on outgoing calls. So this then shows me that our agents here only spent 20% of their day on the telephone. We then see what they've done through the rest of their day as far as how much time they're spending in aux, 67%, 30%, 28% there, and how much time they spent idle. Okay? Overall, 45% in aux, 35% sitting idle. Okay? So again, what does that mean? That means we can sack half this group, make the remaining 2 people work not 30% of the day, but 60% of the day on the phone, and we will save money and achieve the same goals, right? No, that would not happen. It might, but probably not, because of the random nature of phone calls and the other work they obviously have to do. But just based on the calls, you need the people in so that all the calls can be handled within your service level times. Okay? So even though they're not getting a very high volume of calls in the great grand scheme of things, they are needed. And I wouldn't recommend firing anybody just off of this 1 day's worth of reporting. That would be irresponsible. It'd be fun though. All right, so agent group by agent. Super report to really see the occupancy and how much of their day is spent doing certain things. The last report for the basic agents is our Q by agent report there, showing us our non-ACD activity up top, and then which agents took what calls from what queues. Now, for this particular group, they only answer for 1 queue. Other groups may answer for multiple skills, which we'll see. Go ahead, give a click there to HR. Nope, they only answered for 1. I'll take it back. Yes, Jennifer did take a call time call, which was long. Let's go back to our previous report there for our the by QA agent for enrollments. Okay. Notice this column of requeues. The person who caused the requeues was Joshua. He had the highest answered volume, but he did cause 4 requeues on his day. Okay, so keep an eye on him. So what agents answered what calls for what queues? Transfers then, conference calls are also included. We then have our aux work reason by hour and by agent, so you can review the entire group, okay, and all their aux times and codes. ACD hold then by hour and agent as well. All right, so here we can see all of our holds. Go ahead and scroll down to the totals at the bottom. So 99 ACD calls, 56 calls placed on hold for a total of 45 minutes. All right? So here, your ACD talk time was 5 hours, 46 minutes. 45 minutes of that was the calls sitting on hold, waiting for the agent to come back. All right. Any questions on these group reports? Okay. We had seen, what have we seen? Oh, if we go back, we see the activity of our individual agents. Let's jump up and take a look at Theodore. Okay. Theodore's extension, he was logged into extension Zachary here, 49255. Somebody remember that number? Okay. Let's also take a look at Lee Davids by hour. Okay, remember his extension, 49240. And then down here for Evelyn, let's run her appointment office. She's at 2765. want to remember these because what we're going to do now is add our extension call detail report to this agent group or agent template. So how do we do that? We're going to return to our main daily reports. We're going to edit the properties of our agent report here. And then under our properties window, the fifth option down is extension reports. When we click edit there, the first thing we're going to do is check the box up at the top there that says show internal calls for call detail reports. Okay, very good. Now we're going to go through and we're going to find those 3 extensions.
Wow, Control F.
There's a lot of extensions.
7660.
Yes, that was one, right? Yeah. Okay. Now let's just choose the last column here by call detail for that particular agent. There's David B. Yeah. Okay. Did we do Zachary West? Was he one as well? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. They sit right next to each other almost. Or at least they show up together there. And then there was one other agent as well.
2760.
There we go. Okay. Go ahead and save that and rerun the report for me. Okay, so for Mac here, Theodore Mac, I keep calling him Mark or Mac because it should be Theo Mac. Okay. First initial, last name. He had a number of calls. Go ahead and show me our totals. 15 of those, okay? And then he had 4 outgoing calls here, some of which may have been transfers and so on, so keep that in mind. If we scroll down to the bottom of our report, we will see, all the way down, a little further, there we go. Here is our call detail report. So he's on Zachary West's phone. Here is all of his call details. So we can see in chronological order the individual calls. Okay. We can see the total duration. The type of call was an internal. So when it says intercom, that means it's internal. And an intercom call can either be incoming to the agent or it can be outgoing to another extension. Incoming calls are always inbound from a phone number. Outgoing calls that are always outbound to a phone number. Okay. We then see that the calls are queued, so we can notice here that this particular agent handles calls from desktop support and SIS as well. Multiple queues.
Can we go to the bottom of that one?
Yes.
So it looks like he only had 15 calls, but that was, well, maybe it's
He had 15, let's go back to the top of his report there and see what he had, to the very top, to his, very top of the index, excuse me. There we go. So if we scroll down, we will see he had 15 ACD calls, okay, and then there's 4 outgoing and 1 non-ACD call. So that's where we had the 15 incoming, and then we had, then we had 5 other types of calls. So, all right, so those different totals are at the bottom of this particular report. Now, what's really nifty about this report, though, is noticing certain things that happen with certain calls. We know a lot of times an agent will receive a call and then put it on hold, okay, and then do a transfer, or maybe just put it on hold and then call somebody else, talk for a while, and then come back to the previous call. If you know what to look for, you can actually see where the calls are being sent or transferred to. For instance, here's one right at the top. If you ever see an inbound ACD call, okay, so it's inbound, it's incoming, it's from, goes into a queue, and it's immediately followed by an internal or an outgoing call. Okay, mostly it's going to be internal calls like this. Notice the times for these calls. This intercom call here only lasted 2 seconds, and it started while this call was still active, and both calls ended at the exact same time, meaning this particular agent transferred this call to 49224. So now we know a destination or a transfer here. We can see, okay, so notice this one. This is a completely separate intercom call you just made to the CSS main queue, or VDN anyway, 4900, well, we're familiar with that. Scroll back up to the very top. Let's see. Oh, very good. Here we go. We have this intercom call. So it's an internal call to the queue, okay, lasting 20 minutes. Notice at 9:15 he makes an outgoing call, and it ends at 9:16, and then he's able to return for another minute, well, actually another half a minute maybe, on our previous call. So this is not a transfer. This is just he had to call this other person and get some information. Okay. Here's another call that was transferred. They ended at the same exact time, transferred it to 49,000. Here's another transfer then to 49,222. That's actually one earlier. So there you go. So keep that in mind. Look at it. It's very curious. Why do they transfer it back to the bank?
Well, they probably, whoever called hit the wrong queue,
Oh,
right? Maybe
yeah.
they wanted HR, or they wanted
Yeah.
BF&S, so we have to do the levy. And we're not even going to say ticketing for HR.
Right.
You can't do anything for them.
Now, in this particular case, though, notice this call lasted 15 minutes almost. And so this wasn't just a wrong number or a wrong department that was transferred back to CSS main. He was on this caller for 14 minutes and 49 seconds before he sent it away back into here. So maybe he gave them a whole bunch of help, and then he needed to continue.
That's right.
And then connect to
That's right.
HR.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. We can do this now for each of our extensions. Okay, so the extension call detail report, full of great information here about how the agent is handling the calls and who they're actually talking to. Again, here's David Lee with a very long desktop support call. Makes sense too, because they gotta solve that issue, so he's going to talk
Yeah, he's doing
all the way
security
through there.
ticket.
Oh, okay, so he's got a lot of phone work there to handle. Okay, and then we can see any obvious bits here up the top of it. Notice here, then for transfers, outgoing calls. Here's a call into Berkeley. Okay. Yeah. So there you go. So good stuff. Keep that in mind. You can run this now for any of the extensions. Okay. Those are then all of the agent reports on a daily basis. Any questions on that at all? Any questions on any of these reports that we have just run?
On the phone? Okay, I think there's just two people. You won't be able to see the other person.
I'm good.
All right. Any questions again then on weekly, monthly reports, how those would be used? We did show an example, you know, it's the same exact process for building it. So go ahead, play around.
Could you open up the appointment on one?
Appointment on, oh, this particular.
Yeah.
Okay, so here is this individual, okay, making several outbound calls to these extensions. Anybody know what these are?
Oh, 6666 is a voicemail.
Okay, so here's voicemail being checked. I checked it once and then called back to check it again. Did that, and then first incoming call. Notice this call here. Okay, was probably a transfer then or as well. It didn't end on the exact second, but you just dialed this extension for Tang shipping, and that's where it was transferred. And here's another Tang appointment, and then at 8:08:57 seconds. Nope, that's a separate call. Never mind. So separate call there. Call down again. Then reception right twice. Reception left. And so on down the line. This call here, okay. Interesting. He tried to call 25700 while this call was on hold. Nobody was probably there, or he didn't immediately get answered, so he disconnected that call. And then 10 seconds later, he made another call to 27953, which was to this person, okay, while this call is still all on hold. So these calls there, 2 calls while this call is still operational. Although these durations here didn't really end up as anything. So just maybe called, didn't get through, and then just came back and continued to help the customer.
And the 8, like for that one, the 84821 incoming, is that the person that's calling caller ID?
Yes.
Does
So
it
this,
show?
yeah, so this is an incoming call here. This is where the call came from, 84821.
So that's not an extension. That's
It is, but it came through on a trunk, so it's probably from another another hub of phone switch connected to this.
This is a forwarded Citrix number in.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's why we're not getting the right full.
Okay, so it is a caller ID, but it's forwarded, so we don't get the whole number there. All right. Good. Any other questions on these reports? Okay, now I explain how this next reporting feature works. Although we can't use it just yet, we're going to investigate to see if we can put it together because it's super, super useful. And that's the ability to email any of our reports. Okay, notice you have an email link here. Now, before we can click that email link, what you need to do is set up your email settings. So this is something you're going to want to keep in mind because eventually you'll be able to do this. Email settings are set under Preferences. And under the General tab, we have our email options. What you're going to do is you're going to enter your own return email address because this is your login for tasks. These are your settings. And then we need to know your email server name. Now, currently, your email server is on Gmail, which is off-site type stuff. Task uses Gmail too as well. I really like the ability to tag the emails in there with names. It keeps me organized. But because it is an internal, we can't really do a telnet to it over port 25 to issue an email. Okay, now there's some internal stuff that Jim is looking at to see if Geo can help us, and we're going to see if we can do this. But once you have this part programmed here and then you save it, go ahead, cancel there. You can email any of your reports. And what you'll do is you'll just generate the report, and then you're going to click the email link here. You'll tell it where you want it to go. Now this select names button here, this doesn't connect to your Outlook or anything. If you've been using tasks, email, reports here over and over again, it starts saving the names of the people you're emailing to so you can find it later. All right.
So if you're pulling reports, you can email them straight to your boss.
Yes, exactly. Okay. The subject line there will be by default the name of the template, but you can change it to something else. What's most important is the format. You do not want to select text because it's unformatted. You want to select HTML, and when you do that, the body of the email will contain all the reports, one after the other. If you select PDF or export, it will automatically attach every report as a separate file in either PDF format or in your export format, which is kind of separated variable. Now, one thing, of course, to make sure is that when you are emailing a report, that report doesn't contain like 50 reports. Okay? If somebody needs you to email them 50 reports, it would be better to give them a task username they can run themselves. Now, your boss probably won't agree with that, but that's what I would tell them if I was here. Okay. Now, you only want to email the reports that are most necessary to be emailed. Otherwise, it may not go through, especially if they're all attachments. You have 50 attachments to the email. It's not going to work. Okay. So just email what you want, what you need to email. There's no reason now to print reports anymore. If you have to distribute them, you'll be able to send it through email. And then once you're done, you'll hit send. Here it won't work because we don't have any settings. Choose close. And those are the basic steps for email. So if we do get to a situation where we can do that, you'll be all set and be able to distribute reports right from your task. Okay. All righty. Those are all the reports. Now, we learned all sorts of nifty things about what's going on in certain departments. We might want to find out a little bit more about what's happening and look at some details about particular calls. We can do that
Hey, Ryan.
Yes.
Ryan, before you continue, quick question. Can you schedule email reports?
Yes, you can. Okay, so glad you brought that up. You can actually schedule reports to automatically email. You can do this for both for daily, weekly, and monthly reports. Okay. Now, how does that work? Let's go back to our list of daily templates. Okay. You'll see here that it actually says email schedule, and there's not set to none. So let's go ahead and show you how you would schedule an email. If you go under properties for a particular template, Here under email, you can choose to schedule it by clicking the edit. And what you'll do is you'll program this in the same way as a manual email. And what will happen is this template then will be emailed based on a particular schedule. So again, where you want it to go, you can give it a subject line here that's customized. Right? Set it to HTML or PDF attachment. And then down here you have two choices. You can schedule according to the daily schedule set in preferences, which means the daily report will email every day. When you're emailing an automatic report, the daily report emails the previous 24-hour report. A weekly report will email on Sunday the previous 7-day week. Okay? So when that Saturday is over and it's Sunday, it emails the previous week. Monthly reports are always emailed on the first of the new month for the previous month. That would be our schedule set in preferences for daily, weekly, or monthly schedule. There's another schedule, though, called current day. And what that can allow you to do is email the current day's report several times throughout the day. So let's take a look at what the schedule would look like. All right? Now, of course, if we had filled this out, we would then save it. It would then say this is scheduled to be emailed, and then you can close out of the template. So go ahead and choose Done there. Now, what is our schedule for our reports? If we go up to our Preferences link and then go under our reports, we see our schedule options. Okay. The daily schedule, we're going to first tell it what time of day you want the email to be sent. So I always like to set that to right before I come into the office. So it's already sent and waiting for me if I'm emailing to myself. So that's one thing you can do. You can make a template of just the most important report I need to know and email it to me. Because what is the first thing you look at in the morning is your emails, right? And so there's the report. You can look at it. If everything's good, great. If not, that's another thing I've got to look into when I really begin my day, right? So we'll set the time you wish it to email after midnight, of course, so it emails the previous day. And then the days of the week, okay? So if you want the email for every day, then keep them all checked. Now, if you're daily, emailing just daily reports and you don't want weekend reports emailed, what do you think you need to uncheck here in order to make sure weekends don't email? Wrong. No. Yes. You would assume, hey, we're going to turn off emails. But remember, it always emails the previous day. So what we do is we leave Saturday checked and we uncheck Sunday and Monday. Because Fridays will email on Saturday, and it'll be waiting there for you Monday morning. We don't want Sunday's report to email or Saturday's report to email because you don't want weekends.
So this indicates the day of the week that you receive the report, not the day of the report.
Right. Yes. Okay. All right. So that's how we can do it there. Now, if you're only doing like weekly and monthly reports, make sure that all the days are checked because since weekly reports always email on Sundays, if you don't have Sunday or Monday checked, you won't get your email for the week until Tuesday. It will still automatically email, but not until the next Tuesday. And by Monday, you'll want to run it manually. Okay? And then the same with monthly reports. If the month ends on a Saturday, you won't get it until the 3rd of that following month. All right, so I just keep them all checked to avoid any kind of weirdness, and then I might get blank reports and email it. Now, here's the current day schedule. This is super cool. You can set a start time and an end time, and then you can tell it every hour, 2 hours, whatever you'd like. And it will then send you the current day's report all the time throughout the day with the most current information updated before the report gets to you. So if there's a boss who wants the numbers but doesn't want to bother looking inside tasks and using the review screen, you can automatically email reports to them every hour. Okay? Or you can automatically email them to yourself, so you can just look at the reports in your email. Okay? Maybe it's because you're on the road and you can't get onto your task system, but you want to keep tabs on what's going on. Have it automatically send your reports throughout the day. Okay? And you can even set this so if you're between 9 to 6, you can set it just run every 6 hours. Then it'll run once and then you get that one report kind of thing. All right. So yes, automatic emails can be set. So hopefully if we can set up an email system to do that, email server that's internal, you'll be able to use this particular tool. Great. All right, let's take a look at the visualizer here.
Before we get off reports, how do you delete reports?
How do you delete reports? Okay. Within a template itself, you can choose the properties, scroll down to where you have your reports selected, and then just simply deselect those particular reports. Okay. So under my edit here, if I wanted to, I could uncheck Theodore Max report, and it would be removed from this template. So that's one way you can edit your template to remove and then, of course, add additional reports. If you wish to get rid of the template altogether, however, we could go to the Done button. If you choose Edit List, you would then be able to highlight a template in this list and then delete it with the Delete button at the bottom. Don't delete that one, though. You want to go back into that template then. Okay. Try and delete the default one for me. Perfect. To save, and now no more default. I don't ever use that one anymore. Why do we want it there? All right. Any other report questions? Okay, so let's take a look at the visualizer. Visualizer allows us to search for specific calls based on anything within the call, from the date the call occurred, to the time the call occurred or the entire duration, okay, to the type of call. Was it incoming, internal, outgoing? Was it answered or abandoned? We can look at specific attributes, as in, was the call placed on hold? Was it transferred, and how many times? Was it a conference for a certain length of time? Or was it simply just an requeued or interflowed or just an ACD call? We can search on various phone numbers involved in a phone call. We can search on DNIS numbers. Okay? So we've got a DNIS number. I can now do a search on that. And then, of course, we can search on all of the resources, okay? Agents, extension, queues, and trunks. Call ID, this is actually just the little technical label that's attached to the data stream, so that a particular call in a byte is made up of one or multiple records. So it'll have a little tag on them, and that's a call ID that can be searched on. This is something our tech support uses quite often when analyzing call activity and so on. All right, so let's just show you a quick, simple search, right? Let's search for all the calls to a particular queue. So what we want to do is go down to our Queues button here and click our Edit button. When we want to search for a particular individual queue, we will choose the Edit link next to Only Selected Queues. That'll actually then highlight that radio button and bring us into our list of queues. In your particular case, obviously, you'll only see enrollments for your queue. But here, since I've got everything, I can do a search and find a queue that I want to search for. Any queue you want to search for, call activity for. 78811. Type in 78811. And there it is, iCenter. Okay. By clicking Add, it will add it to my selected queues, and I can now choose Save. Now, I will then choose Done, and it will return me to the previous view. Now, notice here that our search is beginning to build. By default, it was all calls today, but now we've added all calls today for queue iCenter. If you wanted to, we can search on today's iCenter queues. But we can also change the date. Under the Date section, we can search on a very specific date, or we can search on a reference date. So let's show you how yesterday works as a reference date. Okay. You can also do last week, last month, half a year. There's a lot of choices in here you can use. All right, so yesterday, in this particular case, would be the 9th. So we choose Done here. All right, so this is a simple search for all calls yesterday where our iCenter primary was involved. So let's go ahead and hit the search button and see what we come up with. All right, 371 results. Okay. And here they are in chronological order. Okay. We see first the date and time. whether the call was incoming, outgoing, or internal, whether it was answered or abandoned, the total call duration of all the calls, okay. Then the caller ID. So in a lot of cases here, the caller ID is just this 5-digit number. And again, that could be because of the Centrix thing, okay. We then see the agent that was involved, or if there's multiple agents, we'll see that. The queues that are involved. So notice here the Rona queue was actually involved in this particular call. And then all the vector directory numbers as well as telephone extensions that got involved. Our last bit here is even the trunk, so you know exactly what trunk line the call came in on. Now, with our call there, we can click on the date and time, and it will draw us a picture of the call. Okay, so we saw this one here earlier where it seemed to transfer it, and then we lost where the rest of that call went in this particular case. Let's go to the next call. All right, here is a basic requeued call. Okay, and I know that because of these two lettered V's in the middle of the report there. Of course, overall, we see the date and time that the call started and ended, where the call came from. So there's our caller ID in this case. Karen was the agent who answered this call. Here's our DNIS number. Okay, so again, these DNIS numbers will be added to tasks eventually. And then we have our total duration, talk time, so on. Now, down here we have a picture of all the calls. And then at the very bottom we have the event list, which is just listing every step through the call itself. Okay. All right. If we place our mouse pointer on each letter here, it will actually show a tooltip of that event. So this particular call, when somebody calls the 4200 phone number, the call comes in and it hits our main VDN, iCenter Press 1 appointment. And it's there for 7 seconds hearing a message. From there, it immediately routes the call into the queue. And in this case here, the call went to the queue and found an idle agent at this desk, at this extension. But notice that the call rang for 35 seconds. That is the requeue timeout for iCenter, 7 rings. And so what happened? The call was pulled from this extension. It was also then pulled from our VDN. And then it was routed to a new vector directory number, the iCenter Rona 1. From there, it routes to the iCenter Rona 1 queue. And in this case, it found desk B being available, rang her for 18 seconds, and then the call was answered. Okay? And it was Marie Taylor sitting at that phone. She spoke for 1.5 minutes. Now notice this at the end of our event list. Okay? When the call ended, it shows me that Marie was the first person to hang up the phone. Why? Because that's what I see here as Marie disconnecting the call. Now, if it was the other way around, the caller hung up first, we would see the caller ID disconnect with a second disconnect at the same exact time for our agent. So you can actually tell who's hanging up the phone first. If you ever suspect somebody is constantly hanging up early on callers, take a look and see if that seems to be the case. Now, of course, this won't tell you that they're just hanging up on people. It will just tell you they hung up first. You can then look at durations of calls and just how often they're repeats to see if there's an issue. There we are, an example of this particular search record. If we scroll back up to the top, we can click a button here that's marked back to results. Let's scroll down, see if there's anything interesting jumping out at me. Now you keep scrolling really fast so I can't actually see what's happening. Yeah, so let's scroll up. I saw a 12-minute call, I think that was in here. There's a 7-minute, 9-minute. Yep, maybe it was. Let's go to the 9-minute one. That's the next one. This one looks pretty straightforward, however. One agent involved, one queue involved, one VDN and extension. So if we click on that, we'll see the call comes in the usual way, only 7 seconds in the VDN, and then it queued. So in this case, there were no idle agents, so the call waited in queue 2 minutes, 36 seconds. It was then answered by our guy at front desk D, okay, which is Karen. She then spoke for 4 seconds, then placed the caller on hold for 4 minutes and 23 seconds. She then reconnected, and then the call was finished. Interesting. What did she do during this time? Okay. This particular search set of results won't show us. But if we search on Karen's agent ID for this day, we might find this out. Let's do that. Okay. Let's go ahead, return to our visualizer search. Okay. And then we're going to go and reset our filter. And now we're going to go for our date. Let's choose yesterday. And then for our agent search, let's choose whoever that agent was, which I already forgot. Long day of talking. Who was that again? It wasn't that one.
Try Karen. I don't remember what it was.
Karen, there she is, 78831. Let's add her. Choose save it.
Close.
Choose done and search. Okay. Let's scroll down. Here's every call she's been involved in. There were 80 of them. Now these aren't just the ones she answered. This is every call she's been involved in. Okay. Now let's. All right. So there's the call. Okay. And here it is again. Now, notice what time the hold event took place. It started at 8:50, went to 8:55. Scroll up and go to the next record. Here is a outgoing call starting at 9:14. What? Okay. Let's go back then to our results.
You're thinking that she made a whole call out.
I was, and I've been proven wrong. She did not. Okay. So what she did was put that caller on hold, and then whatever she did on hold did not involve her using the phone, unless she used somebody else's phone. Can't really tell you if that was the case, but she didn't use her own phone to make an outbound call. Okay.
My guess is because it was only 4 seconds, she probably just picked up and said, "Please hold," and answered. She's just the front desk.
Oh, okay.
So she helped the walk-in. She had her counter. She forgot to put herself on aux. Answered it. Just said, "Please hold," and put them on hold for 5 minutes while she helped the person there.
There you go. So again, knowing what goes on in that particular department helps us to kind of identify what's happening there. All right. Very good. And then here's all the rest of her calls and things that she has handled. Okay.
If you wanted to look at yours, I'd say like you were talking about, where you see they hold and calling out to other groups. We could probably look at Leo. He was doing that a lot on his.
All right. Here's a way we can edit our search filter. If we click edit, we can go up to our agent here, and we can either go back under the agent, but if we click on her name, that'll actually take us to the agent section. Okay. So if we edit this, notice she's already been removed, so let's go ahead and choose Theo. He's actually right up top there. So add him, choose save, and choose done. And now our search is all calls for Theodore. So let's go search again and see what we
And to change his phone name.
okay, so let's keep here. Now, of course, I can't tell if any calls are the same or matching in any kind of way here. But somebody is Geo. Oh, okay, Geo's getting on the test server. Somebody's jumping on the test server there. They won't proof anything else. Okay.
Sorry, that was me.
Okay, that's all right.
I already blamed you.
Okay.
We're looking for an answer and hold time.
Yeah, so we're not going to see that here until we start looking at the details. So let's go ahead. Let's open up this call here. So here's a call that lasted 15 minutes. Okay. So you put it on hold and transferred it. So again, when the transfer happened, and in this case, he's transferring it to CSS main.
That was that one back.
Yeah, so it's transferring it to this VDN, but we're losing the call. Typically, that call should just stick right there. Okay. Do me a favor and click this little dialog box. The call ID is 2855. Okay, so that's the label on these records. Go ahead, scroll to the top and go to the next record. Okay. Go ahead and look at the details for me. It's It's not? No. Oh, okay, I missed that. It's too fast for me there. Okay, so whatever happened to transfer, we'll have to kind of look at that and how things are being transferred, why calls are not stuck together.
I think it's because everything goes to a vector. There's no, in the main queue for 49000, it's all vectors. There's no BDNs when on your press.
So that's got to be it.
You're just losing everything.
Yeah. All right. So anyway, here's another call here to Zachary from this call there. If you take a look at the first ringing event here, we see that this call is a queue call immediately to SIS here, and then he answers it. So again, here's a call that just goes right to the queue, no vector directory number beforehand.
So that's interesting because, how many days that?
This is
So-
949.
There were probably yesterday 2 people in SAS at 9 to 10 o'clock that were logged in. It may have been on calls or opt out, but it had to have gone there first and then come in.
Well,
But we
If-
can't see that from here, right?
what she's asking, they have, so Theo is a level probably 3 or 4
Yep.
on the SIS queue.
Okay. Oh, so that he wouldn't get any calls?
He would never
should-
get presented first.
Yeah.
And it actually goes to a different building on campus first. And if
Well-
those 3 people are not available, it rolls over to us.
Well,
Okay.
there's not, it's not a rollover, it's whoever's available first.
Yeah, so they all belong to the same queue. It's just the other people have a
Correct.
higher level, so it's going to offer it to them first if they're idle,
Correct.
and if not, it then offers it to.
But I will
Yep.
bet you if we looked at Linda's name, she was logged in.
She could
They
have
only
gotten
had
a phone
12
call.
calls yesterday. I already checked.
Okay,
Total for the whole day.
interesting
And it
question.
looks like we have between Theo and David, they took at least 4 of those. That's a high percentage when there's 3 people up there for 12 calls for the whole day.
Okay, here's something interesting then. We can use another tool within Task to answer, okay? The question is, somebody else should have answered this call and not you. You have other people
We're
working.
thinking
We're thinking. So somebody should have
there
answered
could
it.
be a logical explanation.
Yeah, we're going to hopefully find out. All right, now, we could do the search, but that's probably not going to help us. What would help us, though, is if we could look at what was happening yesterday through real time,
Okay?
to see who was logged on.
Okay?
That's where our
Let's
replay
do
tool
that.
will come in play.
Replay.
What replay will allow you to do is take a look at your My Call Center view. So this is all the review sections, but then also see all the real-time data for your queues.
Okay.
So what we're going to do is we're going to plug in the replay to look at a particular queue at a very specific time of day, and we'll be able to see what the agents were doing at that moment. This is first then done under the replay setup area. If we click replay setup, we can first tell it what date we want to search, so we're going to choose the 9th. We're going to tell it what time to stop playback. So what time do you think we should look at?
That call was
That
at
one?
9:49.
Yeah, it was just before 10 o'clock.
All right, so let's put in 9:40. Let's stop it right there. Okay. All right, now
Well,
we
the call
don't.
was at
it was
9:49.
It wasn't 9:49, but we're going to just take a look at what was happening 9 minutes earlier, and then we can maybe move forward a little bit. Okay, what? Or put in 9:45. Let's see that. Okay. So we get close to what was happening
Well,
before
you're
this
just getting
call
one
happened.
point in time. You're not getting a range. You're just getting a point.
Yes,
in
you're
time.
just getting a snapshot in this particular case. Okay. So I just want to stop earlier just to see what everybody was doing
Okay.
before it actually
Fair
happened.
enough.
All right, now we don't have to set up a resource here because we're just going to stop the whole system by time. Go ahead and choose done, and then hit start replay.
And just so you know, I would never figure this out on my own.
Yeah.
This is not intuitive to me.
This particular tool is maybe not so much.
Okay.
It's pretty easy to use, but yes, as far as intuitive.
All
None of this has been intuitive. None of this has been intuitive.
It's all right. I just need some time in there. But keep going.
Okay. Here's then what's going on with our queue summary and our notifications. So no requeues throughout the day here. Actually, I got the requeues turned off, so they're not showing up. The queue summary shows us all our call counts and so on. Now here's the list of all the queues. So what queue do we want to see?
596. This. It's 5 or it's 7. It's 795.
Yeah. So the
Oh,
fifth
it's
one.
going to be right in here.
I think it has 75. 75, not 79. I think I heard 75, right?
I think it's going to be right in there. Slow down.
Yeah.
Right there.
Yeah,
One up.
Right above it.
Oh,
71596.
Okay. Okay, so what we're seeing here,
Yep.
that, why is everybody showing unknown? That's odd. Okay, so Theodore had calls. You should see the activity here. Why is it showing up unknown? Who was the other person that we were concerned
Linda.
with? Linda.
Right there.
All right, so Linda is showing unknown. Okay, this was yesterday we were looking at.
Yep.
Shucks, because it might have been that this activity did not start occurring until we restarted the system there.
Oh, maybe.
Yeah. Let's just do this real quick. Go to the replay setup.
That's right. You guys put SIS in last night. SIS wasn't even in there yesterday. It wasn't capturing that data.
Oh, okay. Let's take a look at today. So go replay setup and just set the start date today. Okay, choose done and choose start replay. Okay, so here's what was happening today at that time. Now, obviously, it's not going to tell you.
Yeah, we'll just pretend this was yesterday.
This is the kind of thing that we should have seen. So we can actually see that we had two agents, Melanie and Aaron, Aaron, who was sitting there idle. Oh, you got that joke? Or no? Okay, very good. All right, I get a little giggle there. I joke. But
Who are the number ones that are supposed to be in here?
here's Charles on an outgoing call. They're all unavailable.
None of those are number one. So Linda logged
Today.
out, but I guarantee you she's in. If I went on there today, I guarantee you she's logged in right now.
Oh, right now. This is at 9:45
I
a.m.
guarantee you she's logged in then.
Okay, we can run her agent report and see what it says to see if indeed she was logged in before 9:45. But according to this, for this queue, she was not.
The only reason I can guarantee you she was is because Cal Central went down this morning at 8 o'clock and she was the one notifying me via chat. And she was logged in. So something's not recording right still, I think. We need to do something.
She's not an AES, right?
Yeah.
Well, it would be the extension,
Right.
but
You should still get the data on her.
So
if the
there's not enough
extension is not the
people.
AES, we would still get some idle activity and AC activity. We just wouldn't get aux or work time activity.
Can you scroll down
Okay,
a little
so-
bit? See who else is Lonnie or Linda or Tammy? And see, there's not enough.
Okay,
And Tammy and Lonnie are not in here either.
do this for me then. Let's jump to reports and run an agent group report on this queue. So you can go into the same, or just create a new template. Call it SIS. Hit save. All right, we'll go down to the agent group reports and go to basic agent group reports, and then do a control F, and we can find that queue real quick. There it is, and break it down by agent, and choose save.
It helps when you're driving, actually.
Good enough. Okay, go ahead and run that for today. All right, so here's today's date. Hit view, bang, here it is, and what do we see? Okay, so Mark Theodore. Our agent named Linda, not logged in.
But she was. I saw it.
She was not logged in with that agent ID that is associated with. Let's do this. Go back to our properties. All right. Go to individual agent reports and agent reports, and then let's find
Linda.
Linda Sands.
Uh-huh.
Okay, agent ID 78229. So there's no other ID she would log in as?
As far as I know, she's only in there
I'm
once.
gonna look in the PBX.
Break her down by hour and hit save and run it. Okay, here it is. Not logged in.
Linda Sands.
This agent ID is not logged in today.
So she using somebody else's ID?
No, she's logged on to station 47447.
As agent ID 78229.
78229.
And she's in what station?
47447.
Okay, go ahead to the review section for me. And under here where it says more, go ahead and click that. The more link down here. All right, 47447, that's it. Okay. The extension she's logged into is not being tracked. That's right. Got it.
We got to put that in the system.
Yep. Good. The answer has been found. Okay.
Okay, what is this message reason bad login?
Okay, so what we've got here, this is one of the notifications we get. Typically, you monitor the re-queues under the notification. But for support and for just kind of continuity, we can monitor bad logins. What a bad login will do is it will tell you when an agent ID is seen by the task data that task does not recognize. So here in the case of all these agent IDs with no name, these agent IDs are not in task at this moment. Okay? And so task, while it says, hey, these agent IDs logged in, but we don't know who they are. So I'm just going to put a bad login up because I can't show you any monitoring. Now, in some cases, you'll see both the agent ID and the phone they're using is not in task, which will also then mean that phone is not in the AES as well. Okay? And so that we're seeing that. In the case of Linda, her agent ID is in task, so we recognize that. But she logged into a non-monitored device. And so tasks can say, hey, I can't do anything with this. I don't know what this is. If this device was in task, we might see some data for it. But because it's not in the task or the AES, I can't track any information of what she's doing. And so there is our error. Okay. And so that's what we'll need to fix. So now this particular extension that she logs into, is that her phone all the time?
I would assume so. It's up in SAS on Telegraph.
It says the name on that phone just says SIS.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we could just say that maybe when we put her in, we just didn't know what phone she was sitting at or just didn't set it up.
And there's probably another one up there too. They have two phones up there.
Okay, well, or it could be that if they have two phones, maybe we're just monitoring the other phone. Whatever the case is, this particular phone was not added to task. So we'll add it to task, and then we will then
Okay.
we will then add it to the AES, restart everything, and then as of tomorrow,
We should have full
will
data.
be accurate.
So would any calls that she answered not be tracked?
No, or yes, I should say. Calls to the queue that we were monitoring will be tracked, even if she's answering them, because when we're monitoring the queue,
It's before that. Before this.
no, well, it's before it gets to her, but it does get to her and it gets handled. But because we're monitoring the queue, we monitor that this call was offered and answered and had a duration.
Okay.
Task may not know who answered it, but they do know it was answered.
Got it.
So, saying that, I can delete every agent from task, and the queue reports will still be accurate. Okay, so we don't have to worry that something's wrong there. But we'll make sure that Linda and all these other folks are added to task. Okay, and then the same case with these three. Okay, they're in task, but they're using phones we are not monitoring yet in admissions.
I'll
so we'll have to
bet
add
you
those.
that other SIS one is Lonnie. Or
Yeah.
Tammy, one of the two.
So that's extension 49224. Okay.
49224 says David Holt.
Oh, we need to get him in too. But he's mine. I care more about him than I do about Sammy, Linda, and Lonnie.
Yeah, so it's coming from the original documentation that I received and the original setup that we're just still adding new agents to this. And luckily, you've got plenty of room. We can pile all these folks in.
Okay.
Okay, so we got off on a little bit of a tangent there, but it allowed us to show how we can use the task software to answer questions. And we have ultimately answered our question, where the heck is Linda? There, but not so there.
Where was
Okay.
Linda?
All right, let's go back to our visualizer. I'll show you a couple things. We had one question with our agent report. So actually, let's go back to the agent reports first. Go ahead and run that agent report that we created and view it.
Oh,
Yes.
no.
No, for
I
yesterday.
think you can have
Sorry. Okay, one of our agents had a call on hold, an ACD hold that dropped. And I think it was Evelyn, maybe. Go to our ACD hold by hour, please. Yep, there's that call. And then we went to the hold dropped, and it didn't tell us anything. So where's our data here? Let's go to our ACD hold by hour report. If you see things that are weird in the reports here, we can search for them in our visualizer as long as we know what we're looking for. So what are we looking for here? Well, we're looking for a call that Evelyn was involved in that she placed on hold. Okay. Also, we know about the time this call occurred, between 8 and 9 o'clock. All right? So knowing those things, knowing the date the call occurred, the time of day, who was involved, and what she did, she put it on hold, we can search for these things in our visualizer. Now here's something that I always do, because I'll go through here and I'll see, all right, I got to look for all these things in the report. Then I jump over to visualizer and I've forgotten what it was. So I have to go back to reports, but now I got to rerun the reports. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the prepare to print link, and we're going to open up this report in another window, so that if I've forgotten what I'm looking for, I still have it open in another window. So here we are now back in our search. Let's go ahead and reset the search. Okay, the first thing we're going to look for is the date. That would be yesterday. We'll choose done. Hey, bye now. Thank you very much for coming.
Bye, thank you.
See you. Good luck. All right. The next thing we're looking for is our agent. Okay. So we're going to edit the agent there. And her, that was Evelyn.
Which one? I'm going to leave you so you can work.
Portillo. Oh, look at this. Evelyn's got 2 agent IDs. Very good. Let's go back to the report. She was agent 79068. See how clever that is? All right. To open that in another window. Okay. So we're going to select 79068. So the add link over here. Okay, she's already there. Go ahead and choose save. All right, and done. Now we want to search for a call during a specific time. Okay, so we're going to go to call times. Under call times, we can search when calls had started, when they had ended, and also the duration all the way at the bottom. Now in this case here, we know the call started between 8 and 9 o'clock because that's when it was handled. Okay? Even if the call ended after 9 o'clock, we know it started between 8 and 9 because that's where it's credited. So that's what we're going to search for. So even though we're plugging in a start and end time for our search, we don't use start time and then use end time. End time is when you want to say, hey, show me all the calls that were ended by 4 p.m. Okay? So if this call started at 3:55 and went to 4:10, it's not going to be a result. I want everything done at 4 p.m. Okay? That's why we use search for end time. But here we're going to search between 8 a.m. 08. And the easiest thing to do then is just change this 23 to 08 as well, because it's going to go by default to 08:59:59. Don't change that. Okay? So it's going to go to just 1 second before 9 o'clock. So it's less typing. I don't have to type in 9 and then 0000. Okay. Man. All right. So we'll save this by scrolling back to the top.
A weird time frame.
Yeah. So from 8 a.m. to right before 9 o'clock, just the 8 o'clock hour we're looking at. Now we could look at that and it will show us all the results, but we could be even more specific by looking at our call attributes. Here, we can search on transfers, hold activity, and then conference calls. And then at the very bottom, you can search on show me all calls that were requeued or just interflowed out to say voicemail and that sort of thing. In our particular case, we want to search on calls that were placed on hold at least one time. We don't care about the duration in this case. We just want to see a call that she put on hold, because that call she put on hold had a hold drop, okay? Good. So there it is. So now we've got quite a complicated search here, which should bring up just a few results and give us our answer. Go ahead and scroll to the top and choose Save. Notice our search now is all calls held greater than to equal to one time on the 9th that started between 8 a.m. to 8:59 for Evelyn. Hitting search will give us our result. Now, if you remember, the first several calls during that hour were also put on hold, so every call was put on hold according to the report. But where is that magical call that we're looking at that dropped? Well, let's start at the beginning, because here we can't really see. We're getting the details that, yes, Evelyn was involved and the queue was involved. Here we had a Rona that occurred, okay, for a Tang apartment, but we don't know if the hold was there. We know these calls are pretty long, okay, but since there's only 3, we can look at all 3 and not actually waste too much time. So here's the first one. This was placed on hold and transferred. And again, we are losing when she transfers to 25,700. It doesn't go to a VDN. It's going straight to a vector, so we're losing a bit of the call there. Okay, so that's not it. Okay, this call was placed on hold, but it was dealt with a transfer. Let's go to the next call. Nope. All right, so here's a call. Take a look at the first, if you put the letter on the letter. Yeah, the letter. There we go. Excuse me. Okay, so here's a call ringing into the Tang appointment queue, okay, through the appointment office vector directory number. And after 20 seconds of messaging or whatever said there, it diverts from that particular VDN and rings the next VDN, which is our Tang appointment Rona VDN. Very interesting. Go back to the first record there. Office Tang appointment skill. 27660, is that an extension? Must be an extension.
Or is that a VDN?
Which number is it?
2760.
Yeah, that has to be an extension.
All right, I interpreted this incorrectly then, because it didn't have the first VDN. This call here just immediately went to the queue. Okay, so that's what I missed. This is a call immediately to the queue, finding an agent who rang for 20 seconds, the requeue timeout. So not any messaging. There's our requeue timeout. And so that's what it's showing here, is that it's pulled from his phone, and then it goes to the Rona VDN. And in this particular case, it then queues up under the queue there into the Tang appointment skill. So because the first person didn't answer, it had to go to the skill, and it waited for 7 minutes, 6 minutes and 57 seconds. It then found an agent here at the same desk, okay, who then connected. They talked for 1:15, put the call on hold, but notice then they came back, okay, and then the call ended after 4 minutes and 11 seconds. So this is not the call we're looking for, because this call did not disconnect. It came back, okay? So our next call then should be our result. I'm thinking it is. Okay, so let's see what happened. Call came into the queue, was immediately answered by our agent. She spoke for 3.5 seconds. She then put the call on hold for a long time, 9.5 minutes. But she came back and talked a little bit more. But wait, notice the little scroll bar here, and this sliver of yellow. She put the caller on hold again, and what happened? After 15 seconds, the caller abandoned. And who was that call from? It was from 84821.
How could you tell the caller abandoned versus her hanging up?
Good question. I can't. Okay. So here was the question: how do we know that this caller hung up and not Evelyn completely disconnecting it accidentally or on purpose? I can't tell you that.
Okay. We just know it ended.
Yes. Go ahead down to the to the end of the report. Maybe I can. Let's take a look at the event list.
Because after 15 minutes, they could have really pissed somebody off on my, made someone angry on my group, and they would have said, see ya.
Okay, I said that I couldn't tell.
But
I
you
wasn't
can.
thinking, but I can. Notice the disconnect events. The first person to disconnect was the caller,
Good.
and that disconnected Evelyn.
That's going to
Evelyn disconnected after.
Yeah, and she didn't disconnect herself. The call was disconnected. So she just eventually hung up the phone.
So it shows who hung up first, though.
Yes, okay. And it was the caller, so the caller did drop the call.
That is
Now, we didn't get the detail in our report for our whole drop report because it was this weird little number here.
So
So
where
that
did
might
you-
be a little bug in the software that if it's an internal or non-phone number, that it doesn't generate the record.
Yeah, what it's that's another one that it's a Centrex number that they forward into the BDN.
Yes.
That goes into a vector.
And so
It's thinking it's 5 digits.
and it's saying it's an extension. I know from our old long ago, the agent, the Q abandoned caller report would not report on internal extensions, only on 10-digit phone numbers. That could be the case here, and so I'll have to check that out for that.
Get an email from them.
But we did find the result of what it was. It was this weirdo number here. They did call this Venus, and there's our call. And why did this caller drop? Maybe they hated being on hold. And she put me on hold again. Oh, I can't handle that. So they hung up the phone. Good stuff. All right. Well, thank you very, very much. All right. So everybody's left our room, well, except you. I don't know why you
So we
stopped
still have
helping
one
us there,
person
but
out there, Erica's still there.
we have still one person there. Any other questions on anything we've covered today? So we've learned all great stuff here with our reports, on our Q reports, how to view them, what they all mean, our agent reports, looking at extension reports to see additional call information. We've talked a bit about the visualizer. We even used the replay and discovered that an agent then that should have been working was logged into a phone we weren't monitoring, so things to help fix there. Any questions on any of that at all today? All right. Well, again, when you're, if you do have questions, the help section is excellent. It'll tell you everything you need to know, as well as the PDFs, including that report reference guide, listing every report, giving you pictures and examples, and telling you what they're all about. Okay. Use the online as well because it's right there at your fingertips. And again, when you are done using the web portal, it's always a good practice to sign out. So please go ahead and do that. And thank you all very much for your time this afternoon.
Awesome. Thank you, Ryan.
Thank
That
you.
was very good. Informational. You want to do your thing with this?
Yeah, let's go ahead and we're going to add those there. All right. So thank you all again.
Thank you.
Everybody that's on the phone, I'm going to end the go-to meeting now.
Hey, Ryan, this is Gio. Hey, I was
Okay.
able to get that email account if you want to go ahead and set that up.
Oh, let's give it a test. All right.
Keeping me out already, huh?
Yeah.
Or is it a system?
Okay, so what is your email server name? Is that what you're referring to?
Get the room back together.
Yeah, it's mail.berkeley.edu.
Get you guys dialed in.
Yeah.
But there's you missed the CAO in the beginning.
Okay, so it's CAO mail.
No, AL.
CAL.
Cal
mail.
Cal football.
.berkeley.edu. Okay,
All right, you too.
let's see if I can send a report.
Oh, you might need to have a Berkeley email address.
Okay. Let's.
But is that do we have a server one? The one that you gets configured on the server? That differently is that for?
What you got, hot date tonight? Bible study? I don't want to miss my connection. I'm on fire now.
SAS. Alright.
That's what kind of school. I gotta be like,
Email.
Tired of Barnes or the back of my car.
you know, I like Bart. You can send it. They should do something. Have those trains run like every.
Alright, we'll check to see if I get this email. And then also while we're looking at this, oh, are you still on the task server there, Gio?
No, I logged out of the task server.
Okay, get back on there, database update was here. All right, I haven't received the email yet, so we'll just kind of wait for it to see if something happens. All right, so this log in here. Okay, dash.
That should do it.
All right.
That's in front of that laptop.
One. Go.
You want to shut the wall too?
Yeah, all right.
You can do that first thing in the morning too. You said you've been with TASK for 22 years?
Yes.
Wow, very nice.
Yeah, it's been a good run. It's a nice small company. People are very, very, very cool here, easy to work with. I've done a lot of changes too, because we had a larger office in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Make sure I stop recording.